Hello there, how are you?
All right, calling the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crane,
Here.
Trustee Wigan, Trustee Soilu,
Here.
Trustee Barto,
Here.
Trustee Murphy, Trustee Pearson,
Here.
Trustee Anderson,
Here.
Dr. Smith.
Here.
All right, thank you. We move on to item 2, which is the adoption of the agenda. I do have an amendment to the agenda. Families requests to remove closed session item 4A, student grade challenge, and bring it back to a future meeting. So that's for the item 4A. Any other amendments?
Yes, I would also like to move, I lost it. It's very different numbers from my other list. Item B23 to the next meeting, to have more information that was asked for in agenda prep. And I noticed something that was incorrect on the contract. And then also I wanted to move item B19 to discussion action, please.
Okay, so the request is to move B19, and we can put it to 20G in the, under discussion action. And then B23, to be clear, you wanted to move it for a different meeting, or?
Yes, to the next meeting, just for more information.
Okay.
A report and data was asked for.
Okay, so do we need, for B23, do we need to have a second on that motion?
All of it will need
A second?
a second, and then the approval and majority of the board for that to happen. I would just say that with regard to data on that item, there will be limited data because it's not tracked. So the data that we're able to provide is on 19. There will be very limited data even next month on 23.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead for B19, make a motion, and then I'll address B23. So B19, we have a motion
You-
to move to discussion action.
They're together.
Yeah,
Okay.
unless you're making the motion
No.
and not doing that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
The recommendation is for the motion to include
Contract is
removing an
actually
item
incorrect.
and
The
then
bottom
moving an
part.
item.
Okay,
It's not.
so do we have a second? Trustee Barto, I couldn't hear.
Again, for item B23, there's something that's incorrect on there that I think we need to fix, but then also there was a request for some kind of information or data as to activities over the past year. We have had no information, and so that was a request in agenda prep, and we didn't receive that. So I wanted to make sure we have that before. There are a couple of things on the contract to me that I thought needed to get reviewed that were unclear.
Okay, so those two, we need a second to move to discussion action. Second. Or are we tabling it for the next meeting? So your motion is to table to the next meeting?
Yes.
All
I'd
right,
like
so do
to
we have a
pull-
second?
Yeah, B23 just to the next meeting, just so we can, there's just something that needs to get corrected, and B19 moving it to discussion action today.
Okay, so do we have a second for those two actions
That makes sense. Second.
as moved? Okay, so let's have a roll call vote.
Trustee Crane,
No?
Trustee Wigan,
No.
Trustee Soilu,
Yes.
Trustee Barto,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy, Trustee Pearson,
No?
Trustee Anderson.
Yes.
So I did not hear Trustee Bartos. Was that a yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3. I believe it's 3. Is it 3, 3? Okay.
3-3.
All right. So we have a tie. And in the event of a tie, we can have discussion.
Would it work to someone make a motion to remove A from
Separate.
closed session? Because that's part of this motion. It's a part of the agenda adoption. And then subsequently, would it work to move both B19 and 23 to discussion? And in more discussion, describe why that is.
Sure. That, yeah.
And at that point, there could be a motion not to approve it and to bring it back. And I think you would get to that same.
Yeah, I want to make sure we've been, there's some cases, particularly for, I think, when there's cities to city for both cities, that we're not getting enough information. And so I've asked for this for the other city as well. We don't have information. So I want to make sure that we're making choices, particularly around student safety, that are well thought out and based on data, not just approving contracts. So yes, I'm okay discussing it. I'm concerned about that, but yes, that's okay.
All right, so we are going to move both of those items to discussion. You're going to make a new motion, or because we're tied right now, we need to.
I thought I just clarified. I'm fine moving them both to discussion action.
Okay.
That's fine.
So I can second the new one.
Okay, so we're seconding a new motion which moves 19, B19 and B23 to discussion action into, let's just say, 20G and 20H. All right, and it was Anderson with the motion, Ersoylu with the second. Roll call?
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
No.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy? Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
The motion passes 5 ayes and 1 no.
No problem. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Do we have any community input for closed session?
No.
All right, seeing that there are no community input on closed session, we will now move into closed at 3:37. Call to order. All right. Trustee Barto, can you please lead us in a moment of reflection and pledge of allegiance?
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
Thank you. All right, we'd like to adopt the minutes as amended. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Trustee Weigand moved and Trustee Pearson seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right. Unanimous. We move on to item number 10, introduction to new staff. Ms. Shields?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mina Blasey to the podium, and we are so excited to introduce our new director, Continuous Improvement Program Evaluation, Data and Assessment. You know we like long titles. That's how we roll. We are so excited because Dr. Blasey comes to us with a host of experiences. She was an elementary principal, a high school assistant principal, STEM creator at the Magnet School, and her last position in Beaumont, she held the same position. Of course, they just call it the director of research and data.
That's still pretty long.
But so we are very excited. She's overseeing the alignment of data-driven decision-making. She believes in not only the power of having data, but the importance of the discussion around it. She has trained staffs and families and others in really using data to center the most important discussions about what students need in the classroom, what students and families need in school. So we're very excited to welcome her into our team. And without further ado, Dr. Blasey.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Crane, trustee members, Superintendent Dr. Smith, Cabinet, and educational partners. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. I'm honored to join the Newport-Mesa Unified School District as the Director of Continuous Improvement, Program Evaluation, and Data and Assessment. Education is incredibly important to me, and I highly value the opportunity to contribute to the academic and personal growth of our students. I look forward to working together with our educational partners, administrators, support staff, and the entire community to support our students in achieving their career, educational, civic, and personal goals. I also would like to personally thank my mom, stepfather, my children, and my sister and her family for watching via YouTube in Washington, D.C., and Chicago, and across the country. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Welcome. A quick photo op. Make sure you get the shoes.
Was there a filter?
We will now move on to recognition. And Ms. Torres?
Yes, good evening, everyone. It is our pleasure tonight to recognize an outstanding educator that we have the pleasure of being able to have over at Costa Mesa High School. So at this time, I'd like to welcome up Miss Racine Cross, if she could come up, please. Racine Cross was awarded the OC STEM Award this year, and she has been a tremendous asset to Costa Mesa High School. The OC STEM initiative is housed by the Samueli School of Engineering at the University of California, Irvine, and is made up of a consortium of both public and private interests, community stakeholders that really support the K-12 education and higher education in the areas of STEM. The goal really here is to foster STEM education across Orange County to create an opportunity for students to be competitive in an economic market. The OC STEM initiative is in partnership with Cox Communication and honors STEM educators who are exemplars of best practice in the delivery of inquiry-based STEM learning opportunities. And if you've ever been in her classroom, you would know that those kids are never sitting down. They are always up, they are always creating, and they are always competing and winning, by the way. So congratulations to Racine Cross, our CTE Teacher of Engineering Design Pathway at Costa Mesa High School, for being recognized as the 2024 Outstanding K-12 STEM Educator in the high school category. And she was awarded $500 for herself and $1,500 as a classroom grant to support any of her STEM activities. So congratulations to you. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Potness, who's here tonight, and Lisa Snowden, who is our CTE Career Guidance Counselor Coordinator, and Trustee Murphy for that photo op. Congratulations.
All right, so we move on to the Harbor Council PTA report with Cynthia Strassman and Martha Floor. Wow. I'm the schlepper. You're a schlepper.
Well, good evening, Dr. Smith, President Crane, trustees, cabinet, and guests. Good to be here. Good to see you. It's been some time. Well, it's a wrap, right? Another year, right? Another great year. So over the last couple of weeks, I had a chance to sit down and just kind of think about all the things that were accomplished this year, not just with our PTAs, with our council, but with the school board. And I took a look at the district's news site just to refresh where we began and where we ended. And wow, what a year. Much has been accomplished. So to the school board, we thank you. We thank you for your leadership, for making the tough decisions that prioritize our students' best interest. It's no small feat to guide our schools through the myriad of challenges and opportunities that arise, and yet you have done so with unwavering commitment and grace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a small token of our appreciation.
Since we don't have our flower cart flowers, this is perfect.
Aw. Enjoy. Just a little token.
Thank you.
And when,
Thank you, Martha.
okay. To our superintendent, Dr. Smith, your vision and guidance have ensured we continue to provide a high-quality education and a supportive environment for all. We are grateful for your hard work, positive impact you have made on our district, and of course, supporting our PTAs and its mission. Thank you. Okay, to our principals and teachers who are watching or here tonight, we are grateful for your steadfast support of our PTAs throughout the school year. Your dedication to fostering a collaborative and inclusive environment has been crucial in our efforts to enhance the educational experience for all students. Thank you. To the parents, we thank you for your involvement and support, as it is crucial to the success of our PTAs and the well-being of our students. Your volunteer hours, participation events, and continuous encouragement help create a strong and vibrant school community. Thank you. Last but not least, thank you to our school community partners for their support throughout the year. Your collaboration and generosity have been vital to our success as a whole with the school district and have significantly enriched the lives of our students. Smith knows flowers. Okay, all right. Before we conclude our report tonight, we always like to report on membership, right? Because we are membership driven. That just kind of shows the power of the PTA. This year, we have over 94,000 plus members within our 4th District PTA. 4th District PTA consists of 19 councils and 451 PTAs in schools. So that's a pretty strong membership number. Our district alone, oh gosh, where were we at? Over 5,000 just with our district alone, so that's pretty impressive. Can't wait till next year, be competitive. Okay, so what we'd like to do right now, something a little ceremonial, a little fun, to wrap up our report, we'd like to have Dr. Smith and President Crane come forward. It's nothing scary. Okay, I love it. This is the PTA way. Okay.
Make sure to get the shoes.
Yes. Yeah, and the right angle. Okay. Okay. We are honored to present the ceremonial check to you, representing the incredible volunteer hours contributed by our dedicated PTA members. Our PTA members, as you all know, include parents, grandparents, siblings, students, teachers, staff, and community members within our 27 schools. This check symbolizes our hard work and dedication to our students and the district. Collectively, our members have volunteered a total of 156,201 hours. If we were to assign a monetary value to this time, it would amount to $5,231,000, $231,196, demonstrating the significant impact our volunteers have made on our school communities. We are proud of our collective efforts and look forward to continuing our partnership and collaboration next year. So, thank you. Oh, sure. Get my shoes.
I'll get the shoes.
So last but not least, I know that Martha reported last month, but Martha is our new incoming president for next year. So welcome aboard, Martha. You're now at the helm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. As you know, you are a priceless partner in our kids' education, so we appreciate you. And $5.2 million, I am not, it's probably higher than that. So let's move on to the CSEA report. Amy Ching?
Yep.
I am really appreciating everyone's jovial here tonight. It's fun to be around. Good evening, President Crane, trustees, Superintendent Smith, cabinet, and guests. First of all, I want to acknowledge all the staff and the students that are participating in our summer school programs. I've been hearing good things from people, so that's a positive for students, and we appreciate that. And we know that education is a year-round job for a lot of people. So, CSEA, our chapter, I wanted to introduce Emma McAllister. She was just elected as our parliamentarian. She's a school community facilitator from Costa Mesa, and she's been coming to a lot of meetings, so you may have seen her. We're very excited to have her with us. She has a lot of passion for the students at her site and the staff, and just really brings a lot of good energy. So we're thankful to have her. And then I just wanted to have a brief little moment. We're in negotiations right now. We're going to be meeting again on Friday. And this is my first time, and several of us in our group, we're new to this process. And I just want to thank the district and for the training, the LMI training that we were able to go through. And I think that it's been very positive. And I feel like our groups really respect each other and listen to each other's perspectives. And so I just want to say, so this has been a great experience, and I expect it to continue. And so I just want to thank the district and the other team for that experience, for this experience. And then lastly, most of our executive board will be attending our annual CSEA conference in San Jose next month. At the end of the month, we will be missing the next board meeting, sorry. But we'll gather there with several thousand other members from around the state and to do the good work of CSEA statewide and really build relationships in that manner also. In addition to debating and voting on resolutions, there's a donation drive that happens every year for our Dorothy Bjorg Humanitarian Fund. And we, being Chapter 18, always donate a check for $1,818.18 for our, so that makes it special for Newport-Mesa. And that's it. That's all I have for tonight. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amy. And we move on. Is there no Newport-Mesa? Okay. They're at a conference this month. Just taking turns. All right, so superintendent report and comments. I mean, did you want to say anything? Or? We don't have any community input on non-agendized items, correct? Okay. So let's go on to superintendent comments.
No comment.
No, like thank you for the flowers, or hey, the $5.2 million check. None of that? Okay. All right, so community input on agendized items. Seeing as there are none, we will move on to achievement, item 17.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome Vanessa Gailey up to speak to you about the local indicators for LCAP. As you know, it's part of the annual process where we have to make these public declarations of how we're doing. And I'll leave Vanessa to the details and appreciate all of the hard work she and the entire team has done to get it to here. So we can turn it in.
Yes, thank you. So President Crane, Superintendent Smith, members of the board, cabinet, and guests, we look to be entertaining and succinct this evening as we look at the local performance indicators. This is a required report, and it will be posted on our website tomorrow. And the local indicators are created because there's some data for which the state doesn't have that quantifiable data. So we have these local indicators around basic conditions of learning and implementation of state standards that you just can't find necessarily in test scores. And so every year, the district reports on outcomes and a lot of self-rating tools. And then ultimately, these results make their way to the California State Dashboard. And so currently, what you would see right now is a report, the 2023 report, and that is really based on 22-23 outcomes. And that is going to stay up until December. So we're going to do this report tonight. I'm going to submit it to the state in the next 5 days, and you will see that in December. So we just want to make sure people know that when they go to the website at the state right away, you won't be seeing the results from this report, but again, it will be posted on the website. So the requirements are that we measure our progress on this local performance, and then it's based on locally available information. And then we report it to the district and to the public through the California State Dashboard, and we ourselves determine whether we have met, or not met for 2 or more years. And so remember that the requirement is that when we measure and we report, we will have met the requirement. So the first area is the basic conditions of learning, also really looking at the Williams legislation requirements around a teacher assignment, curriculum, and then the school facilities. Now again, if you go to the website, what you will see is this data, not necessarily recent, but that's what's available on the website. And so that's what the state has provided through a new system that they're still kind of tinkering with. And so what they're working on right now is trying to get out the 22-23 data. We would like to see it on the December dashboard, but in all reality, it's possible that they may not have that. We thought you'd like to know about right now. And so right now, we want you to know that we have 0 misassignments of teachers for English learners. All of our teachers are credentialed and have that for English learners. And in Gen Ed, we also have we only have 2 total teacher misassignments, 1 CTE credential and 1 librarian credential. So all of the kids are getting great educations. And then we had 2 vacant teacher positions, one of which just had gone longer than the 30 days. So really what you see is the vast majority of our teaching staff are appropriately assigned. Also, we have 0 students who don't have access to their standards-aligned copies of materials that they could take home. And we report on our sufficiency of materials every October. It's a standing board agenda item, and that is something that we collect that data through all of the schools, making sure that teachers have reported whether they're missing any materials or not. And then finally, safe, clean, and functional school facilities. We measure this annually on the Facilities Inspection Tool report. Every school gets a report, and then that is put into the School Accountability Report card, which all families and community members can access through our website. Every school has a School Accountability Report card. So all of our schools meet the good or exemplary standard according to the Facilities Inspection Tool. So we've met the requirements for Priority 1. Priority 2 is around implementation of state academic standards in these following 5 areas, and it's prescribed by the state. And they give us a tool that has self-ratings. And so the self-rating tool is on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 the lowest being exploration and research, 5 being full implementation and sustainability. And so in this first one, this professional learning area, this is around providing professional learning for teaching, and it's according to the adopted standards. Now, the grid on the left is about us evaluating from July 1st, 2023 until today. And on the right, what we have is our plans moving forward. And so the other thing to know is that the blue box is about where were we last year, and then the X indicates this year. We wanted to make sure you see, have we grown, have we moved from the prior year? And so what you'll see is we believe we're pretty much in the same place in terms of implementing that professional learning, with a bump for history social science, because we adopted history social studies in elementary last year, and then we provided that updated training, and so we've moved along the continuum now. When you think about our self-ratings, we have to look at ourselves as a TK-12 system, and so elementary could be in one place, secondary could be in another, and we have to take that into account when we're thinking about where does this fall. So we're looking toward next year, and we're really excited about all the work that we're going to be doing with thinking maps and the science of reading, but especially with our new math adoption. We know that our elementary teachers are hungry for more math professional learning, and it'll be aligned to that material, but really what it is about the alignment to the standards. Also, we're excited about the listening and responding to thinking for secondary. That's not a new topic, but them leaning into thinking maps, and us again having that TK-12 continuum is another area of professional learning that we're very excited about. And of course, we've often highlighted some of the practices we use in terms of getting feedback through the survey, and then also using that floater teacher team to make sure that we have guaranteed training throughout the year. And then lastly, we're exploring a co-teach model at the secondary level that we're really excited about, doubling down with the adults, the skilled adults in the room, supporting the professional delivery. Instructional materials aligned to academic standards. Again, when you're looking at that self-rating tool, we think we're in a very similar place as prior year. Again, next-gen science standards is a 3, and we want to move that to a 4. But remember, we have not had PD for next-gen science standards for the elementary teachers, but we will be launching that 2-year rollout. So we anticipate a shift for next year, but that PD just hasn't been delivered yet. And then you see the other areas that we're focused on. Again, the K-5 math we think is going to be really beneficial in terms of moving along the instructional materials and the PD. Policy and program support, these are things that we do to try and enhance the delivery of instruction and their structures. So things like collaborative time, focused classroom walkthroughs, teacher pairing and mentoring. Those would be practices that are policies and programs moving along the continuum. And so we think that we've had some movement in the next gen science standards in terms of that program support and getting a little bit more of the teacher pairing and mentoring at the secondary level. And then again, you see some of the opportunities around early release, late start, our instructional coaches. And in the secondary this past year, we also had science teachers, or science TOSAs at both grade spans. So we felt like that was impactful. And then again, in terms of implementing other academic standards, all fours across the board, we're excited about the CTE alignment to the model curriculum standards. Again, all of the excellent PE that we deliver at elementary and secondary, and of course, the VAPA that we have developed. And then lastly, support for teachers and administrators. We feel very confident and are proud of the work that we've done about looking at teaching staffs as a whole. And we continue to think about those individual case-by-case bases on what we can do to continue to support the teachers, particularly those that haven't mastered the standards. And we're really looking into the TOSAs and instructional coaches and all of the models we have to support our individual teachers. And then we always want to highlight the P3 literacy team that we have in place. It's done quite a bit in terms of really thinking about what do we need to do next in terms of moving the professional learning for our teachers. Priority 2, we've discussed, we've measured, we've reported, and now we've met. And so when you're thinking about building relationships and partners and partnerships and seeking input, again, the state has given us some rubrics to look at when they're thinking about specific aspects of how we're growing in those areas. One thing that we do is the annual LCAP survey, and as we mentioned at the last meeting, we will be relentless about growing our participation. But of the people who gave the input, we want to focus you on all of the green. There's a lot of green, so there is a lot of satisfaction in terms of thinking about welcoming approaches at our schools and receiving communication. We want to continue to hear from more people, and we want to stay looking at the green. So we think, again, when we're looking at the self-ratings tools, and we asked for educational partner input from our DLAC board, we asked for our school community facilitators in thinking about this work, and then lastly, site administrators to give us their input. And we feel like, as of now, we are in pretty much the same place as last year, thinking about the really welcoming environments that we've created, thinking about the opportunities to engage in that two-way communication and knowing that those are our strengths, and really thinking about ways that we can improve, looking at the strengths of our cultural assets and all of the assets that families are bringing. And really, when you're thinking about building those relationships, the first step is that welcoming climate. Next, we'll think about the partnerships, and so things that we do are provide these opportunities for families to learn about what's happening in the district and ways that they can continue to enhance their practices at home. We do have a parent education series. We also have a dedicated web page that lets parents know about the series and supports throughout the district. Two things that we want to highlight. One is Grupo Crecer, which has been very well received throughout the last 3 years, and we're going to expand for next year with an additional group, Disciplina Positiva, discipline, right? Thinking about ways that we can have positive practices. And then also reminding everyone that the sites are where most people go to get information about their kids and about great practices. And so we support site-based workshops around academics and behavior. And they're all given funding to make sure that they can have translation, interpretation, babysitting, light refreshments. So those things are supported. And again, we ask families then in the LCAP survey, do you get resources that you need in various academic areas? Are you encouraged to participate? Do you know about the Parent Ed series? And so you again see all the green. We're very pleased that people seem to know about many of the resources and that they are in fact encouraged to participate. So in our building our partnerships, we know that we've provided the number 4 academic, the information and resources to support learning at home. And we know that we've really been working on ways for elementary families and secondary families to meet and discuss student progress. We also know that we have some work to do in terms of building our capacity to partner in the learning. And so that is one area that we will be focusing on when we're looking at next year, trying to enhance building our partnerships. And then lastly, just drawing your attention to people knowing that they're encouraged to join school site council It's a tour of duty that we welcome people to attend and participate. We're always looking for people to come. You don't have to be voted in to participate in School Site Council. Your voice can be heard. Same thing with the English Learner Advisory Committee. And parents know that they're invited and that they're always welcome. And the agendas are always published and they're available on the website, and the dates are there too. So we encourage people to please attend just one. And then in terms of seeking input then, we have really worked hard to try and make sure that it's known that it's out there. And we want to work on building the capacity to engage families and really get that two-way communication. We know that there is a little bit more work to do in terms of partnering with families to help us plan those events and then to continue to build on the evaluations of those events. So family engagement, we've reported. We've met. And so now we're going to look at school climate. And so I'd like to call Sarah Coley forward, our Administrative Director of Student Services, and she's going to talk about school climate.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. All right, good evening. So for school climate, we are required to administer a school climate survey. We choose California Healthy Kids. We have a minimum requirement to do it every 2 years, and as a district, we've decided to do it annually. One, to just gather more data so that we can continue to respond to the changing needs of our students, but then two, to make sure that we're looking at different groups of students, because if we followed the every other year, 5, 7, 9, 11, we'd be looking at just the same group of students every 2 years. And so we really feel like this is really valuable data for us as we continue again to respond to our changing needs of our students. So the goal for response rate is 85%. And so you'll see that for 7th grade, we did hit that, which we're really proud of. We got close for 9 and 11. And then 5th grade, we were below that at 61%. So the first area that we're looking at is for school safety. And so this is really focusing on that anti-bullying climate, our students feeling safe at school, and so forth. And so you'll see for elementary, we did have a decline this last year versus the previous year about students feeling safe. It was a change of 2%. And then for our 7th and 9th and 11th graders, we did have an increase in student safety. So again, that for us is really valuable to understand that our students are feeling safer, but there still is a lot of work for us to do, especially at the elementary level. Then for school connectedness, again, how connected are students feeling to school? We saw an increase over all grade spans this last year, or for this year, which again, we're proud of. We still have a lot of work to do for students to feel connected because we do know that this is a huge indicator of student success, but we will continue to focus on student wellness and helping students feel safe at school as well as feeling connected at school. Then for caring adults, kind of a variety. We had a little improvement for 7th grade and 11th grade, a small decline for 9th grade, and no change in 5th grade. And so again, just continuing to work on finding opportunities for students to build relationships and for them to feel like somebody at school does care about them. And then high expectations, again, we know that this is an important indicator for student success. And so making sure that we are finding opportunities to set those high expectations and raise the bar for students. No change for 5th grade. And then we did see, again, an improvement for 7th and 11th grade, and then a decline for 9th grade. And so really overall, we're really looking for those opportunities for students to feel safe, to feel connected, and for that to be highlighted in our schools. And we know that our teachers and our staff do that, and just making sure that our students are feeling that and that's being communicated to them.
All right, having measured and reported for school climate, we're moving on to course access. And this is really about providing that broad course of study to as many students as possible, and then describing what we do to encourage and support students that have exceptional needs, as well as the unduplicated students, which is low-income English learner and foster youth. And how we assess ourselves is on the outcome end, so really thinking about our 5-year cohort outcomes and graduation, looking at the regular graduation rate as well as the students who meet the UC CSU requirements, looking at our CTE pathways and our VAPA opportunities. So as in years past, we're proud of the broad course of study that we offer in elementary. You can see what's required by Ed Code in grades 1 and 6. So we offer that through the regular core program with our teachers of record. And in addition to that, we have music instruction provided by music specialists. We have PE specialists and we have science specialists. They augment the work, the fabulous work that's already happening with our regular ed teachers and teachers of record. That is our default instructional program. In secondary, same thing, you have the required courses study and ed code on the left, and then we have some outcomes on the right. We have some graduation rates we're really proud of. Again, this is the 5-year cohort model. You can also find 4-year cohort data. And so you see some increases, slight increases in each of the areas for all students, English learners, low income, students with disabilities. And then when you look at the UC-CSU requirements, those are also affectionately called the A to G requirements. You'll notice they're different, because graduating with some courses is not the same as having the A to G, which isn't bad, it's just a different course. And so what you'll notice there is that compared to prior year, those numbers are down, the percentages are down a bit. And our hypothesis is this has to do with two things. We are at the tail end of reduced credits for graduation from COVID. So we've had steadily increasing graduation rates, which is great. We've also offered quite a bit of credit recovery. And that really gets kids across the finish line. But many of the credit recovery courses are not necessarily A to G. Again, that's okay. We have a lot of kids who need to graduate, and maybe they're not going to have the aspiration of UC or CSU, and they're going to go a different pathway. So these are some of the things that we are thinking about and looking at as we continue to look at graduation rate, which is wonderful. 95% is a good grad rate. And then thinking about what we can do to support the UC CSU eligibility. Finally, we have 18 pathways in CTE, and we have over 89 various courses and over 260 plus classes. So think of all the courses and then the class offerings that kids can choose. So we're excited about what the opportunities are for kids. And as you'll see in the LCAP, over 52% of our 7th through 12th graders participated in a VAPA course last year. And then CTE completers, we had almost 15%, which was our goal, and which equaled 245 kiddos. It was an increase over prior year. As you see, we had 14.7 compared to 12.4. And just a visual. We have a really fabulous website with a lot of information about our pathways and what's offered in each of the zones. So we just want to encourage members of the public to please go check it out. There's a lot of really great information that our department has put together. And now I would like to call forward our Director of Multilingual Programs, Laura Dale Pash, and our Director of Special Services, Dr. Elsie Briseño Simonovsky. And they are going to speak to 2 areas where we talk about our broad course of study and what we're doing to provide support for our students with unique needs.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me join the presentation to share just a little bit about English learners. Excuse me. So when we think about broad course of study and access for English learners, we really strive to provide comprehensive language development for all English learners throughout the district. And so we provide daily designated ELD. What that looks like in elementary school is a differentiated group based on the student's proficiency level. And in secondary, looks a little bit different, also based on proficiency level, but placement in an ELD course. And then our students also receive integrated ELD, and integrated ELD occurs during their content learning and involves scaffolds and strategies to support their language development essentially throughout the day and all of the other content that they're learning. Just a snippet, I'll be back in just a minute after Elsie.
Good evening. And so in regards to access for our students with an IEP, it really is about ensuring that they have the inclusivity, that they're a part of this, that there's also approved curriculum, and then on top of that, that they are provided that broad course of study in district approved curriculum. And so for the first one, we always want to ensure that to the greatest extent possible that our students are provided that opportunity to participate with their peers to the greatest extent possible. The second one is we look at standards aligned curriculum is tailored and really personalized to meet their learning needs. Many times as we look at the IEP goals that we have and the services that we're providing, ensuring that our teachers and our paraprofessionals have those same types of resources and information needed to ensure those entry points are accessible. And so you can kind of see that there's a PD statement right underneath that that ensures that the teachers are provided with those professional development opportunities. And we're really grateful to have our Ed Division partners allow our teachers to participate in those trainings. And then as we looked at this year, ensuring our paraprofessionals are also being a part of those trainings as well when we, special education, are providing those trainings to our teams. And then lastly, when we look at our students with mod severe disabilities are provided in unique situations, as not all students with mod severe disabilities are provided unique learning systems, or what we call ULS. But when that is necessary, we provide them those opportunities, and we have some great teachers on TOSAs who can provide, again, that professional development for those new or even returning teachers to ensure that they have those access entry points and training when it is appropriate based on their IEP.
We're also supposed to identify barriers to providing access to the broad course of study for all students. And so when we think about what some of those barriers might be, they are things like scheduling limitations. If you have failed courses, the more courses that the student fails, the harder it is to be able to provide access to that continued broad course of study while also remediating credits. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to pass on the first try, but we do offer a robust opportunity in summer school as well as credit recovery should it be needed. We also know that there are varying grading and homework practices, and we continue to work on that to look at consistency and then to think about what we can do to make sure that the kids get the classes they need and that they get the passing grades. Gaps in schooling, as we see students who are newly arrived or have had gaps, trying to fill those gaps and try and get them on course and propelling forward. And then lastly, just having that shared vision as we're working between gen ed and special ed, and we're staying together and working on how best can we be inclusive and moving the kids through that broad course of study when they have some unique needs. Oh, no. Okay, so in terms of informing the development of the LCAP, when we think about what we do, then so what? After we do all this analysis, we make sure that we do the following. We continue with our default programs. We do the best that we can to give kids access from the very beginning. We offer a broad CTE pathway model so that there's lots of choice. We offer intervention models and courses when we can so that students can make up credits and learning. And then, as I mentioned, we have the after school and summer school academics and enrichment. And so now we want to focus specifically on English learners.
So the first two here are really just a reinforcement of the information I just shared regarding designated English language development again, and then the second one, integrated English language development that's available for our English learners during their content learning. The last one is our co-teach model, and so that's something we're looking forward to in the coming year of expanding our co-teach model in secondary to provide English language art standards and English language development standards for designated ELD through those courses, and we'll be doing that for our long-term English learners at 2 of our secondary sites. So we're excited to do that in the coming year.
So we talk about informing the LCAP for students with an IEP. This is really a nice tiered approach as we're looking at addressing those needs systematically, and again, in partnership with our general education. So first of all is ensuring that we provide continuous professional development for our teachers. We're really excited about the trainings that we've been able to provide in the past, and really looking this year, again, I want to thank our team for being able to even look at our launching for next year. We're going to be able to provide more robust training for our teachers during the year with co-teaching, as you're hearing about, but also after hours too. So those are good future opportunities that we're really excited about. And looking at inclusive practices. So this is just, I know it's a broad term and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of individuals, but we talk about inclusivity again to the greatest extent possible. When can we insert those opportunities? So whether it's informally, where it might be during nutrition or recess, outside with their peers, or looking at more strategically during the day, at certain times of the day, during whether it's math, reading instruction, transition times, things like that. So where we can embed those inclusive practices, we want to be mindful and really integrate those opportunities. Looking at special education staffing, I know that that's always a growing and changing need. So when we look at staffing, making sure that it is tailored to meet the needs of our students, and when we need to adjust, pivot, we are making sure that we're following the necessary compliant pieces to hold the IEPs to make sure parents are informed, and then making sure that in a timely manner we're providing those staffing supports for our students. Looking at push in and pull out instructional models, just in providing the variability. Again, sometimes it requires a pull out opportunity where we need to make sure that we're providing that service by that individual or service provider, or when we're pushing in, and then again being great partners with general education and letting teachers or other paras know that we are a part of this together. We appreciate your partnership when we're pushing into those classrooms with our other students. And then lastly, collaboration between general education and special education instruction. And so we talked about course access earlier, making sure that our teachers are also trained on instructional techniques, strategies. You hear a lot about thinking maps. And so our teachers have been really excited and proud of that work and being included in that. So again, we're just really thankful for that partnership.
And thus it ends. Thank you for your attention to the local performance indicators. We have met the requirements provided by the state, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. And
it wasn't 10 minutes, but we did our best.
So we have some questions.
Excellent.
We will begin with Trustee Bartow, Anderson, and Wygand in that order.
Thank you so much. This is really great, and I just appreciate how you took the high level and made it very, like, the important points. I'm so happy to see so many more students are taking CTE classes, especially with the UC-CSU. That's very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everyone has the same path to be successful, so that's great. But what impact does the UC-CSU? I know we always watch it. Is that something we watch just to kind of keep? Where does that standard come from?
Well, it comes from the state. That's part of the required indicators, so we have to make sure that we have them. And it is something that we want to make sure that we're opening the doors for every child. So we would like for them to be able to attend a UC or CSU if that's their choice. So it's an advantage in that regard, but it's not necessarily the only path.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a plan to kind of address that other than, I know we said what we were going to do because of credit recovery, and I think that makes total sense, but what do we have a plan for that going forward?
Yeah, so anytime we have a student who has been unsuccessful in a course, we put them in credit recovery, and we work with the families to choose either a course that is A to G certified, or if they go into a standard credit recovery, then that wouldn't be. So that is something that we continue to present to families when students are making those choices. We also encourage them to be able to take their credit recovery or remediation, as it's called, at the community college. And if they do it there through our community college partners, then it is A to G. And so those are things that most recently have been challenging, because you may have heard in the explanation tonight that now that we are back to pre-COVID expectations from the state of California, and just the way that our graduation credits have been realigned, we have seen a decrease in the state in terms of our college and career readiness indicator. But to your point, we continue to put that in front of students. We continue to make sure our high school counselors are guiding students in the right direction to get us back to a higher number.
And because I know a lot of times that the summer classes that are offered for remediation through like a OCC, for example, are not always available to the degree they used to be. I was just looking this up. And I know other high schools will offer it during the summer. Are we, I'm not hearing that from a lot of our counselors. Is there a way that we could make that message clear, that if you want to do, because I think that that's such an important thing, that if people want to, they know they have the opportunity. Maybe not through community colleges, because when you go on their catalogs, they don't offer the courses that we would necessarily align with in the summer anymore. They're in the spring, which doesn't work for most students. But I know like some other of our local high schools do. Is there a way we can make an outreach to our counselors to say, hey, like if a student wants to do credit recovery and wants to get this A through G, and it's not immediately available through like OCC or Golden West, like here are some other options? Because I don't necessarily see that from all of our counselors.
We have a petition for outside courses. It's an opportunity that students can get from their counselor, and they can complete that form to request permission to take a class outside of our organization for a maximum of 30 credits in their time with us. It isn't something that's always advertise just because we want to ensure that students, when they go out and search for a course, that they are getting the right course.
Yep.
Right, so we have to make sure that, just because they go to another school district doesn't mean that theirs is A to G certified either.
Right.
So sometimes they're taking something and they have an expectation that is not going to be met. So we have this petition for outside courses process, and that's what helps a counselor speak with the student to talk about what their options are. And then we kind of know in our office what's being offered out in the universe, because people let us know too, whether it's a community college or some of the other I call them for-profit schools that offer courses, so that we could connect students with that.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. It was more just me thinking out loud of that's a problem that we have. How can we, what are ways to address it that I'm just not seeing? Thank you.
I also think we're looking at early intervention, and that's why the AVID at elementary is so important, and that parents understand, and upper elementary students understand the courses they begin taking in middle school lead to the opportunities they have in high school. And really that emphasis that Laura was talking about in terms of reclassifying our students and long-term English learners, getting them out of loops that would preclude them from completing A through G. So really kind of backing the train way up and starting so parents and students understand why and what that means and what happens if you don't do it, as well as get them prepared day one of 9th grade to be in the right classes and be successful in those classes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Trustee Anderson?
Oh, thank you. That was a great question. I am really excited for this whole format. I think it's really helpful and very clear. I'm glad to see our great improvement with seeking input under parent and family engagement, so great job. I was wondering if we have plans for the building relationships piece. It looked like we had I think you said last year as well as this year. Who would be the person that would help develop plans to improve that?
I think we share responsibility in all of that. I think right now the way we're set up, Vanessa is kind of harnessing parent engagement, Chrissy harnessing partnerships, but everybody in every part of the organization has been investing in those and cultivating those. But what we noticed was we weren't really tracking it, and we weren't amplifying those efforts because we weren't necessarily integrating them and making it kind of the full force of our organization. So we'll be working harder on that this year in a more unified fashion.
That sounds great. Yeah, it sounds from the question that it's about supporting staff more. So I just want to make sure that we are training staff in how to do those, what to look for, how to build in culture and goals for children. I think that's really key. And I remember at one point we were talking about, now that the previous times are over, about doing home visits again, so people would have exposure and be able to interact with families at home. I know some facilitators were really interested in doing that. Do we have any plans to perhaps do that next year?
I think as of yet, completely no. However, part of the work with the community schools grant and really kind of elevating that, we knew that there would always be a limited number of schools that were eligible to even participate in that. But we always have seen that as an incubation spot for ideas that will then affect the rest of the district. So we will be getting kind of with the tip of this spear, if you would, at those fuller schools, but looking for ways the system can incorporate those successful ideas for everyone else in ways that it is. And we've been growing our attendance efforts even starting this year, and the idea of really understanding the community we serve. I mean, that imperative never goes away. So we'll be exploring that further.
Okay, perfect. And then I also was wondering about the building partnership item. It looked like we also had some room to improve on that. And it looked like it was the school's capacity to partner with families, and then the helping with parents and families understand their legal rights and advocacy. And so I was just wondering if we could possibly get that information by site. It would be interesting to see. And then what plans do we have to increase capacity? Because I know it's one thing to know, the families more, but how are we going to increase staff capacity in that?
Yeah, as we finalize those, and hopefully we'll have something for you by early August or September, we'll definitely share it with the board.
Awesome, thank you. And then just One last thing that I would love, not for tonight, but the teacher assignment section was interesting. I would love to know what each of those sections mean. There are a couple of interesting sections up there, so just for another day.
Are you talking about the definitions for the 2021 data?
Yes.
We can get you that.
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Ersoilo and then Murphy, or Trustee Wygan, I'm sorry, were you next? Yeah. Yeah, okay. And then Ersoilo and Murphy.
Back to questions on the A through G requirement. Do all counselors start all ninth graders on the path to be A through G compliant by graduation?
As part of the 4-year planning process, that's the goal. They have an intake meeting with their students. They sit down and they create their course of study. And then what ends up happening in many California high schools is by the time a student has gotten to 10th or 11th grade and they've had some challenges academically and they aren't able to pass the math components and don't make it past the 3rd year of math, that automatically knocks them out of the running. So there are times when we do see students who start off on a pathway in 9th grade but can't complete that A to G pathway because they stop their mathematics at a certain point. Mm-hmm. And so the University of California requires at least 3 years of mathematics, at least algebra 2, at least 3 years of science. And so those are things that sometimes students make choices and pivot later.
Okay. So it's life happens really throughout high school. And but we start them on that path. We don't just say, what would you like to take, as opposed to guiding them through A through G. Yeah.
They talk to them about A to G, and I'm sure there are some conversations where kids are like, absolutely not, no way, no thank you. I'm sure that happens. But the goal of the counselor is to create that 4-year plan with them on their first go around in summer before they register and have those conversations.
Okay, thank you. Because I know that's a big, you see it in the news a lot where they say only 58% of our students are ready for college. And like that is, obviously it's that's such a misnomer, really, misperception.
And we're very fortunate that we have our new, K-12 mathematics adoption where we can try to fortify that level of instruction because that is the most challenging course for most high school students is getting past that hurdle.
Yeah, and we have a new course of study from this past year, right? That has really been enabling people to pass that 3rd year. Awesome, great, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Ersoilo.
Thank you. Still on the A through G. Sorry. So, and I know I've brought this up every year I've been on the board. This is my last time, so don't worry, I won't bug you again. The discrepancy between the 58% A through G and then that being only 42% for our low-income students, again, that's like a 30% differential there. So it's like, what can we be doing? Is it that is it this math issue that's getting most of our low-income kids to get more derailed? Because everyone definitely deserves the same opportunity to go to college. If they don't want to go, that's fine. But having this, 30% differential between our low-income kids even being able to go to college still deeply concerns me. So trying to figure out where the root of that is, I think to what Dr. Shields mentioned earlier, how early does that train go off the tracks so that we can make sure that our kids are the low-income kids are as close to the average as possible moving forward. But that wasn't my biggest worry. My biggest concern was actually the low response rate for the 5th graders on the Healthy Kids Survey. Do we know why that is or where that is? Are there certain schools that are having those parents opt out more likely than others? What's driving that?
Sure. So one of the big differences is that for 5th grade, it is an opt-in. And so parents have to sign a permission slip saying that students have permission to take the survey. So some of it is just not receiving those permission slips back, and we won't administer the survey if we don't have parent consent. We do have some schools that do have a lower response rate, and we have that broken down separately from this report. But it's just varying degrees. Some parents aren't super comfortable with some of the questions. Some people just don't want the survey to be taken by their child. So there's a variety of reasons on why it's a lower rate.
So the older grades, it's Out?
Out. Yeah, so it's passive consent, and so a parent has to opt out of the survey at that point. And so we do see a higher rate at that point as well. Plus, students are older, and so parents, from what we understand, I can't speak for every parent, but from what we understand, some parents do feel more comfortable with their students answering the questions.
And is that more common? Is that just the norm across all districts that it's opt-in for elementary?
It's
the rule.
It's required. So yeah,
Okay.
it's a standard of the California Healthy Kids Survey.
Okay.
That's not us doing it. It's a requirement of the survey.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then the second question was around seventh graders, and my daughter just finished seventh grade, so I feel this one very a lot. Those seventh graders feel the least safe, and they feel the least supported by an adult on campus. So I'm just curious, how are we using this data from this around the seventh graders in particular to drive some innovations? Maybe restorative justice can finally get some light in this district.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe targeted in a pilot to the seventh grade.
Sure.
Something.
A big piece that we see is for students, because that's their first year in middle school, right? And so sixth grade and lower, they're with one teacher. They have the pullouts with specialists, but they're really not feeling connected because they have, they go from one teacher to maybe 5 to 7 teachers, and you're bringing a bunch of students from all the different elementary schools together, and maybe their friends didn't come to school with them or whatever the case may be. But we do see that students do have a difficulty with that transition. Some things that we're looking at doing is having more transition meetings with our elementary counselors. And so that's been a request from them is, can we sit down and talk with the secondary counselors, not just about the students that we're concerned about, but let's talk about all students. And is there opportunities for us to help bridge those gaps and really utilizing those relationships at the elementary school level again, to help with that transition and to start building those relationships sooner, getting kids on campuses, seeing what types of activities there are, helping to get them plugged in before they even get there. So it's definitely one of those areas that we know we need to grow, but certainly something that we're looking at as we move forward.
Awesome. Thank you.
To follow up on that.
Trustee Murphy and then Anderson.
Oh, you looked at me.
I saw that your light was on. I said second. So Trustee Murphy?
Thanks. So again, sort of on the school safety question, I just was a little concerned in grade 5, the breakdown of students who feel safe at school and percentages by race and ethnicity include 93% Asian American, 82% African American, 84% white, and then it drops down to 69% Hispanic. And then actually the Hispanic number is lower actually for 9th and 11th grade in terms of school safety. So
Sure. Yeah. Right. So, definitely something that we are looking at as well, and really breaking it down by school to see, is it specific more to a school or a zone? Is that across the board? Because this really is it's an aggregate across the district, right? And so, and this isn't just something that we see in Newport-Mesa. This is something that, as California Healthy Kids Survey, looking at all of the data, this is an indicator that has come forward even in their analysis of all of the data, is that students from different backgrounds aren't feeling quite as connected. So again, for us, as we look to increase our partnerships and the different initiatives that we have, finding opportunities for all students to feel included and to feel safe at school, not just certain students. And so something that, again, that we continue to focus on and work towards.
good, I know. I don't know if it's good to know that we're not the outlier, but
Well, right. It's not something that I would say that we feel good about by any means, but it definitely highlighted an area of work for us to really, look at opportunities for students to feel connected and to feel represented on their campus, right? And so that, by finding things in students their first language and providing support in their first language if their English isn't their first language. And that's something that we've done even through our mental health work, is finding opportunities in the community. Okay, if you're Russian speaking, we're going to find you a Russian speaking counselor versus just sending you out there to anybody. And so again, finding those opportunities for students to feel included and represented is something that we continue to work on.
Yep, thank you. I will, just a quick shout out to the PTA. When at Kaiser, we used to, when I was president, we worked really hard to reach out to our Hispanic parents or Latino parents at Kaiser and bring them into the PFO at Kaiser. But it was really successful in terms of, I think, bringing the families into the school, making them feel more included, especially making sure that every communication goes out in both languages. And so sometimes I don't always see that.
Yeah.
Area of growth and improvement.
And then I just one more question about on the students with an IEP. And so we talked a little bit. You talked a little bit about professional development to support inclusive practices and co-teaching. Can you explain a little bit more about that? What exactly that is and how it's being implemented? What's going on?
Yeah, so thank you. For the professional development, we talk about inclusive, so I'll talk about inclusive practices and then co-teaching. Where we're at the end of this year is we've had co-teaching in our district for a number of years, so that's not new at the secondary level. I think we went through 2 different WASC visits this year, and so as you probably heard through that process, really bringing back co-teaching as some professional development for those sites. And so in May and then just recently this month, we did have some co-teaching training for 2 of the high schools. When we start back in August, we are going to work on training more teachers at the secondary level. And so Dr. Shaka and I have worked on a comprehensive plan together. So that's a really nice opportunity for, again, general education and special education to come together. We talk about inclusivity right out the gate. It's been really nice working with Dr. Shaka. I think we started back in January or February, some of that initial planning when we knew WASC was coming. And not just because of WASC, but we knew that this was a great time. COVID has sunset. We're back again, going back into the business of doing great training and professional development. We know that some of our students who do have an IEP, where we talk about that collaboration time and looking at co-teaching in English or other core content areas and really building back out that robust opportunity. So we have some great training lined up. We've started some initial trainings kind of the last quarter of this year, and then we do have some trainings lined up for next year in co-teaching. And then for the inclusivity component, we are looking at UDL, Universal Design for Learning trainings that we're looking at for this year. And so we're trying to create and design unique, personalized opportunities for students and teachers to insert differentiated learning, differentiated opportunities based on our unique learning needs of our students being trained in UDL. And again, this was something that happened before. I think about 2 years ago, we had about a UDL training. I'm kind of looking at others because I was not here, but I'm remembering as fast as I can right now when we had that. And so bringing that back again, UDL, so we can look at those opportunities to really personalize and tailor instruction based on our students' needs.
That is great. And then so the professional development on the co-teaching, is that something that is mandatory, or how is the participation going with that? Or is that something you're identifying certain teachers need to participate in, or is that, sort of their
extra teachers?
Yeah,
we're putting extra teachers in the room.
Co-teaching is a specifically created classroom that from the beginning is for special education students and mainstream students, and it has the special education teacher as well as the content specialist teacher. And so from the beginning and by design, it is constructed where everyone is learning in the same environment, and they're actively learning from both teachers, and students who need the extra support to master the grade level standards are given that in real time in the classroom. And so it all has to be pre-planned. It is very specific, and it is ensuring that the teachers who are taking on that assignment are trained to be successful, and that the students will have opportunities to be successful.
So are they going into the accommodated classrooms, or are they going into the regular?
Trustee Pearson, 1 second. Trustee Murphy, are you done?
Well, I guess I would just for clarification, so our
Sorry, she was looking at me to speak up. That's the only reason I said it.
We do this together. So in terms of identifying the teachers who are going to do this, is this something they are opting in to do? Is this something they're being identified to do? Is this where is this coming from?
So part of it, so it comes from a couple of different areas. And so one area would be the student's IEP. So if it is a co-taught collab class, that's what we see in Synergy, we know that that's going to be a co-taught course. What we do know too is we look at students, again, going back into that more least restrictive opportunity or environment, if we're seeing that there is an opportunity for students to participate in a co-taught class, this would also come from the administrators. So an administrator might say, hey, here's a great opportunity. I have a general general education teacher, I have a special education teacher who may want to teach a course in science or in math, and we do have a grouping of students who might benefit from that instructionally. So then a site administrator might organically say, and I've had some conversations with secondary administrators to say, I want to build this class, I want to have this co-taught class, is this a possibility? And so we work together to see what those opportunities are, and then if necessary, pull students both in general education who might be struggling and might benefit from what Dr. Shields was saying, a general education content expert with a special education differentiation expert, and bridging that together too.
Which sounds great. How many classrooms or how many classes do you think we have operating like that now?
I know at one of our high schools, we had, I believe, 16 teachers trained, so that would have been at least 8 co-taught classes at one high school. I know a second high school that we're working at partially at the end of this year and next year, I think we have about 16 or 18 teachers, so that would be about 9 co-taught teams, so minimally 9 classes. So it depends, because every season or semester is different, because needs will be changing, again, depending on IEPs, maybe students who had high pass or fail rates, and again, so it could change by semester.
Is that something you think we need to expand more on? Do we need more classrooms like that, more co-teaching opportunities?
So it's definitely a great way to look at students having more access to core content areas. Specifically, we talked about math earlier. We know that there is a lot of research that supports co-taught classrooms, especially in the areas of mathematics. Just some research specifically when we know students with disabilities. We know that there are some students, I know one research specifically, where we talk about students with autism that might have a higher success rate when there's 2 teachers in the class. Again, you're looking at 2 very different teachers that go through their credentialing program with very different skill sets. And so when you bring those talents together, the opportunities of students being able to be more successful with high quality training, support, trained administrators becomes just much, more successful too. Just like in anything, thinking maps, things like that. When you do have a good, robust program, the ability for students to thrive and be successful becomes even, greater.
And so, not to keep on this topic, but is this training is it a day training, a 2-day training, month-long training, weekends? How quickly can teachers kind of...
Great question. So what we've done so far is we've had a full day training. So the trainings that we've offered this last half of the year, it's been a full day, like a traditional teacher workday, professional development for co-teaching. For the co-teaching for the administrators, right, the role of the admin in co-teaching, those are about 3-hour sessions. And so we do have some lined up in August for administrators, both district or central offices and the school sites. And then during the year with UDL, you could do a UDL training all day long, but what we're looking at probably is a 3-hour training, again, just to be able to capture and cast a wider net of more teachers being having that opportunity to do UDL training. And again, making sure that we're not pulling them out all day if we don't have to, but if we know we can meet the goals in UDL and co-teaching within the time frame, UDL 3 hours, co-teaching a full day, then we're going to try to aim in those areas. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. No weekends.
No. I'm
no
just
twilights
I'm
either.
just wondering how long it takes to get up to speed on that model, to be trained in that model. So it's not like a year-long process or something like that. So it's something that can happen more quickly.
Yeah,
it's
been a 1 day, and so the training that we just had last week, 2 weeks ago, I was out. The feedback was excellent. The teachers were very, very happy with our trainer that we had for that day. And one of the comments that I received from the trainer was, everybody should go through this training in the 1 day training that we had.
That's what I was wondering. And then one last question is, because it sounds great, but are teachers coming back to that? Are they opting in again? Are they, how does that work? Or do they say, I'm done after a year?
So I know just with teachers who have gone through co-teaching training in the past, and I'll speak to a middle school that I worked with this year, they had gone through the training, they did ask for a refresh, and so I worked with Mrs. Torres and the principal at that middle school. So we did a refresh at OCDE to participate in that kind of a PD opportunity to do a refresh or a reset. Again, it's been years since some of our teachers have gone through that co-teaching training, and so just to kind of do that reset. And sometimes expectations change, parity priority, new curriculum comes in. And so just to have that reset, we've kind of leaned this past year at OCDE to kind of help us do that reset.
But for the most part, the teachers come back who've done it before.
We could probably look at that data specifically to know for sure before we answer that qualitatively.
That would be awesome.
Off the cuff. But I do think there's the training and then there's also the supporting it throughout the year because it is a partnership and all partnerships require work.
Yes.
And, you know, that is an ongoing issue all year long. And as they were saying, to have really two full professionals participating and feeling valued and in that classroom, I mean, that's daily work. And so supporting that collectively as a system, because there's hearing about it when you're just, and then there's real time applying that. And it's a dance, like everything else. And it's a dance when you're alone to teach, let alone with two in the classroom. So it's always a work.
I know, I guess I'm just thinking from the special education side from the wanting to, you know, as a priority for Lisa and I in terms of making sure we can be successful as we can in our special ed implementation.
Yeah. So
across
what
all
I would
yes, Sarah.
what I
thanks.
would add to this is, you know, we've worked throughout last year with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, right? They came out, they sought feedback from different people, and just recently, as an executive cabinet, we determined that co-teaching is one of those areas that we do want to kind of support and follow up on. So as we kick off this next year, you will get much more information about it. We would love to have you come out and see it in action. And, you know, and we're determining, like Socorro said, kind of some of those metrics are going to be to how do we know that it's successful. And, you know, we've looked at what core content areas do we believe as a district are essential for us to do co-teaching. And co-teaching at secondary looks different than co-teaching at elementary. And right now we've kind of put our focus on secondary because we already had systems in place and being able to do that. So they're not at every school, and that's kind of our first year back. We're, you know, tightening and strengthening the ones that are in place, and then as we move forward. So much more to come on. I didn't mean to co-op your LCAP conversation, but much more to come. We're very excited about what opportunities this has on both sides. For the gen ed staff and their comfort and knowledge of content and working with all kids. And then on the special ed side, being a co-partner in that classroom, not the aide walking around. And so those are things that you really have to consciously make efforts to make sure you're continuing to do that. So, and then you always want to find teachers who are willing to work together. So forced marriages don't often work.
Yes,
so
that
you
part
know,
I
those
get.
are just some pieces that we will continue to deal with. So as we kind of launch, as we get into the fall, we'll be glad to include more data and more information on that.
That'd be great, Sarah. Thank you.
So,
I really appreciate it.
Trustees Anderson and Bartow, in that order, do you have questions about co-teaching? Because Trustee Pearson has her light on, and if we want to stay on the same conversation, would you mind
go ahead. I just had a quick,
relinquishing your time to her for now?
I had a very quick question.
So Trustee Pearson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank you because my community, as Sarah knows, they are really want this co-teaching in the classrooms to help those kiddos that, you know, are that middle special ed who we could really bump up and open up the doors for. So thank you. I can't wait to get out there and check out those classes. I guess my question is are we hiring new teachers for this, or are these teachers that already exist? Are we adding more support for our kiddos, or are we taking the regular general ed teachers for this?
So currently we have existing co-taught teams, but in talking to some of the principals as we're assessing the needs for next year, there are some principals who have identified new teams, new teachers, general education and or special education. So it's a sprinkling of both for next year. And then the content has changed, sorry.
No, and it's really not hiring additional staff to run this. On the special ed side, it's our SAI teachers who teach both basic skills and often a content area. And so it's really kind of tightening up maybe some of those sections of basic skills and to say, can we free up 2 other periods of the day for you to be a co-teacher and be able to do this. So we'll kind of evaluate it as the year goes in terms of class size and where we need to adjust, but that's how we're looking at it to start.
Okay. And one quick question about AG, sorry. I know we are doing so much, the counselors sit down with our students in 9th grade. It was eye-opening to me as a parent to go to the 9th grade counseling meeting and hear about this AG stuff. Are we preparing parents maybe in junior high now? Is there a training for the parents?
Yes, and thank you for acknowledging that that is a great opportunity for parents, and some of our schools do it better than others. And so we do have some of our schools who have focused parent nights to talk about the A to G process, and some of that is at middle school and some of it's at the high school level, and that is an area of improvement that we can continue to grow in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great. So Trustee Anderson and then Bartow.
I was going to save my question for later, but it actually directly correlates to that. I was wondering, based on what we've heard, and maybe this is for later, but do we need more secondary counselors specifically for middle school? Because yes, we have some of our surveys and things are opt-in, opt-out. To me, parents assume when they send their kid to school that someone at the campus will be helping them walk through that process, and often don't come with their child and don't know what they need to do. They don't know what needs to happen for them to be A to G ready. So, and I know I've heard from some of our counselors that they have enormous caseloads, particularly in high school, but maybe Dr. Shaka knows this, but I mean, for a middle school, do we have like 1? Do we have 2?
Thank you for the question. This year, Leona Olson and I have gotten together and we have evaluated our counselor ratios across the district. And so that's work that we've been doing actually since I came aboard, but most specifically recently, we looked at that. I will say that Newport-Mesa wins in terms of the county. So our caseloads, even before the additions of new counselors, are great. And so we have a really low, when the county average is over 550 and in some schools 700, we are closer to 350. But to your point, Trustee Anderson, we added actually 2 new middle school counselors moving forward for next year.
Great.
After we evaluated those numbers and we identified the fact that our middle school students, by their very nature of starting middle school, need more attention. We have added an additional counselor at Ensign Middle School, and we've also added an additional counselor at Costa Mesa. We have a 0.5 at CDM that we added as well. That's part of that team. So as we look at those types of challenges, we have made adjustments, and we recognize that that's probably the most fragile group in the secondary strand.
Wonderful. That is excellent news. And you probably know what my follow-up question is going to be. Do we have a 0.5 or what do we have for Tewinkle?
We actually added a full counselor. So when I came aboard, and I only, I have to think about this recently because that's where my brain is. And so when I was hired, we had 1 counselor over at Tewinkle. We added through Title I a portion of a counselor, and now we rounded it out to 2 full-time counselors. So their ratio actually is 250 to 1.
Wonderful.
And we have 2 amazing individuals over there who are doing tremendous work.
Thank you. All right. Well, and can we also make sure though that the parents know that they need to be all of those are wonderful, but we have a discrepancy in some of our schools, right, for parent engagement because parents think it's handled at school.
We understand that.
So
yes.
is there a way that we can, with our beautiful ratios, particularly at Tewinkle, wonderful, make sure that we're sending out information to parents as to what they could ask and or something with like an opt-out, like, did you know, here are the classes you need. The communication piece is our
It's
struggle.
work to be done. You point out an area that, again, I think is a continued area of growth. We can always do better and do more. And in working with Vanessa, we have been able to kind of put all this parent engagement and opportunity under one umbrella that she's helping us sift through. So the answer is yes, we can do more, we can do better. And these counselors, as we added the elementary counselors as well, part of their roles and responsibilities are to engage the community on specific topics and things that we're trying to highlight in the community. So yes, I think you can expect that.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustee Barto and Trustee Murphy.
My question is.
Yeah, one little thing, sorry.
I'm keeping track here.
My question is quick. If the rest of the board would like to see this information too, I would just love to know for our students who aren't going to UCs and CSUs, who's going to community college, what percentage is going to community college, what percentage is going to trade school, or what percentage is going to just a different school altogether that, you know, some university in a different state that doesn't require UC, CSU things, if everyone on board with that.
We can put something together over the summer because students do self-report that data. And so our high schools do collect information, but because it's self-reported, it's not always all inclusive of every student, but we'll do our best to collect that for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know it's not part of this program, but just for, thank you, appreciate that.
And as a state, California has lagged in bringing all of those data sources together and creating one comprehensive data source. They are supposed to leapfrog. We are supposed to leapfrog with some magic that'll come out of Sacramento. We are not holding our breath, but I'm sure it'll be better than where we are for anyone in Sacramento watching. But that will also help us be able to report on what students are doing post-graduation, because our systems are so isolated and siloed now. It is hard to see the trajectory, but this cradle to career data infrastructure should help us get better at that. To Carrie's point, right now it's self-reported, and we lose a lot from other institutions that don't track or don't share. And so we do hope that's supposed to come online this year, and we hope over as that grows and as they work through whatever kinks there are in that system, that we'll be able to have a much stronger data-driven, clean data, as clear as possible and comparable, quite frankly, across other schools and other organizations to see how our students are faring and how we're doing in preparing them for that success.
Thank you so much.
That's great. So I was just informed by Dr. Smith that our next presenter clocks out at 8 o'clock, and this is the feasibility study.
This is super
So
quick.
Trustee Murphy,
It's
you'll
really-
be the last one.
Yeah,
Is
it's
that okay?
just, yeah, oh yeah.
All right,
it's
we're
just
good with that?
Very
Okay.
quick.
Sure.
I was just going to say, Vanessa, this is what happens when you do a short presentation, long questions.
We're at 46 minutes.
Lots of questions. But then, and then on the opt-in for the fifth graders, so I will just say, as a recent fifth grade mom, that digging through the backpack to find that paper is hard, and it doesn't just magically appear in front of you with your student handing it to you. But so, is there any other way to? Because I don't remember necessarily getting anything from the teacher or the school side about filling it out. I might have, but.
So communication was sent. However, I think that points out a great opportunity for us to maybe communicate more and to find alternate ways to communicate, just so that parents are aware, so that those. Sorry, go ahead.
Can those forms go out electronically?
They sure can.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can explore, as we go into the new school year, because we'll be administering it again in the spring. We can explore alternate and additional ways to communicate that out, so that parents, have a variety of ways, whether it's email, the form is electronic and so forth.
In the crumpled up piece of orange paper that's at the bottom of the backpack?
Right. Yeah, we can work on that maybe. I don't know if we can fix that problem. We'll try. But I think finding other ways to communicate out to parents is certainly something that we can do.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We now move on to the report on the bond feasibility survey. Trustees, if I may remind you, our report is being presented via Zoom, and Bob would like to remind you to speak very much into your microphone, but also pause in between questions, because there's a 2-second lag between the Zoom and our AV equipment. All right, so go ahead, Mr. Trader.
So as you're aware, we move forward with facility maintenance master plans. And so one of the options to fund these projects is to look at a general obligation bond. And so the board recently authorized a survey to be done. And so tonight we have Dr. Timothy McLarney, who will be presenting the results of that survey.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I'm Dr. Tim McClarney. I'm the president of True North Research. We are a firm that for the last 20 years has specialized in working with public agencies, school districts, cities, counties, et cetera, in using surveys to help them develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve.
Hello?
To date, my business partner and I have worked on over 1,300 research studies for public agencies, and about 80% of the work that we've been doing for the last 2 years is what we call revenue measure feasibility studies, like what I'll be talking with you about tonight, where the goal is to understand if it's feasible to move forward with some type of revenue measure, and if it is feasible, to understand how might you go about structuring that measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. We've helped our clients have a lot of success over the years. To date, we've raised about $35 billion in voter-approved measures at the local level. Overall success rate's about 95% for measures that we recommend go to ballot based on the research. And out of the last 15 school bonds that have passed in Orange County, we've done the polling for 12 of those 15. So I mention that mainly because as I go through tonight's presentation, I may make reference to how the results we're seeing here in your district compare to what we're have seen in the past or are seeing in this current election cycle for other districts. And I just wanted you to have a sense from the experience base from which I'd be speaking. I also welcome questions from the board as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference. Okay, so I'm assuming you can see my presentation here. So great. So before we jump into the actual results, helpful to take a moment to review the purpose of the study, why we do this type of research, as well as the methodology. In terms of the purpose of the study, for a revenue measure feasibility study, it's really designed to address the 3 bullets you see here on the slide. The first is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible? And what I mean by that is if you as a board were to take the action of putting a measure on an upcoming ballot, does it have a reasonable chance of success? Answer that question isn't always yes. Sometimes we do this work, and no matter how you stare at the data, there really isn't a clear path to get you from where you are today to where you need to be viable on election day. And if that's the case, I'll be the first person to tell you that. When we do find feasibility, that second bullet kicks in gear is to understand how might you go about structuring a measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. There's lots of components to a bond proposal. There's the price tag, right? What's this going to be in terms of an aggregate bond amount as well as the underlying tax rate? There's the project list. How are you going to, if you are successful, how do you propose to be spending the funds? What types of facility improvements are you interested in? There's also accountability provisions that can be built into these measures. So there's all these important decisions that you as a board would have to make if you were to move forward with a bond measure that the survey can help guide. And then thirdly, it's an opportunity for us to understand the role that information plays in shaping voters' opinions about your proposal. I'm a big believer that if a public agency is going to take the step of putting a measure on a ballot and asking voters to make that decision, it's really incumbent upon that agency to inform voters about the decision you're asking them to make, right? As a public agency, you're not using public dollars to advocate up or down on a proposal, but it is good practice to make sure that voters have the basic facts and figures. They understand kind of the why of this measure being on the ballot, and then they can come to their own well-informed decisions. In terms of the methodology, we use the same methodology for this study that we always use for revenue measure feasibility studies. And the first question that we want to sort of think about when we're getting ready to do one of these studies is to understand what election are we thinking this measure would be on. The reason for that is different elections have different turnouts, and as you expand or you shrink turnout, you will often get a different profile to the group of voters that are going to be casting ballots in that election. And so it's really important, if you're going to have a reliable study, that the sample that you choose is drawn from the group of individuals who are actually likely to cast ballots in that election. In this case, we're thinking about that likely November voter this year, right? Someone who's going to actually participate in the presidential general election of 2024. That is a very high turnout among elections. It's the highest that you're going to get in a 4-year cycle. And what we do is, once we've identified all the voters that we think are likely to cast ballots in that election, we use a process called stratified and clustered random sampling to choose a sample that matches the profile of that likely November universe on all the dimensions that we know tend to drive how voters behave when it comes to bonds and tax measures. So the balance by different age groups and gender, partisanship, household party type, where voters are located within your district in our sample matches that of that likely November universe. Once we pulled our sample, we used 3 different recruiting methods: email, text, and telephone. Everything's PIN protected so that Only individuals that we have randomly selected and invited to take the survey can access it. They can take that survey and complete one time only. They have the option of doing this online or by telephone, whichever was their preference. We wound up with 535 completed interviews as part of this study, and because this is a random sample of 535, we have an overall margin of error due to sampling of about plus or minus 4.2% at the 95% confidence level. What that means is we can be 95% confident that the results I'll share with you tonight are within 4.2% of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your likely November voters. So, oops, let me back up right here. Okay, so on to the results. This first slide shows the results of what we call the importance of issues question, where for each of the issues on the slide, we simply ask voters to tell us how important is this to them. Is it extremely important, very important, somewhat important, not all important? This is a great warm-up question, just kind of gets voters into the groove of taking the survey, gets them thinking about local issues. It's also an opportunity for us, though, to understand how education as a topic stacks up against some of these other issues that also compete for tax dollars. And in particular, how does the topic of improving the quality of education in local public schools stack up against the issue of preventing local tax increases? Rough rule of thumb, makes a lot of sense. The more importance that voters place on the topic of improving the quality of education in local public schools relative to the issue of preventing local tax increases, the better positioned you are to move forward with some type of education-related measure. In this case, what you see is that the number one issue in your district was, in fact, improving the quality of education in local public schools. You had 86% of voters tell us that was extremely or very important. If you move down the list, preventing local tax increases comes in at number 3 at 69%. So there's about a 17-point gap there between those two issues. That's a little smaller in terms of a gap than what we're seeing typically this cycle. The typical gap's more like 22, 23%. And so, that just tells us relative to the average community out there, your voters, although they obviously place a lot of emphasis on improving the quality of education in local public schools, they also are a bit sensitive to the concept of local tax increases. The other issue or item I'll call to your attention is if you go down one up from the bottom here, you see repairing and upgrading aging school facilities checks in at 64%. So below the issue of preventing local tax increases, and certainly well below the issue of improving the quality of education in local public schools. It's not unusual for this item to test a lot lower than the item of improving the quality of education in local public schools. We always see that pattern. And the reason I point this out is because although bonds are about facilities, they're about the improvements you're going to make to your classrooms and your school facilities. At the end of the day, voters don't care so much about facilities when it comes to education as they care about what happens inside those facilities. And so you always want to kind of be connecting the dots if you move forward with a bond between what it is you're building and fixing in terms of capital improvements, but how this item of repairing, upgrading aging school facilities really ties into the number one issue that voters care about, which is improving the quality of education in local public schools. So you're wanting to be connecting the dots constantly between what it is you're doing with your facilities and how that ultimately sort of shapes your core mission of educating students. So after that importance of issues question, we get right down to business with what we call the initial ballot test. And the idea here is before we get any deeper into this interview, start talking in more detail about possible tax rates that could be associated with this measure, types of projects that could be funded, arguments pro and con related to this proposal. We want to present to voters a mock-up of what we think that 75-word ballot statement could look like and get their reaction. The initial ballot test is a really good gauge of where your voters are at on the natural with respect to this proposal. So here is the language that we tested. It takes the form of a legally compliant 75-word ballot statement. And here are the results. So at that initial ballot test, we had 56% of voters say that they would support this proposal. You had 31% opposed, and you had about 13% who were unsure. So in the state of California, for a Prop 39 bond to be successful, you need 55% support. So we're sitting just 1 point north of that Prop 39 threshold required for passage. So after the initial ballot test, we get into the tax threshold section of the survey. And naturally, voter support for a proposal like this can depend on the price tag. The higher the price tag, all other things being equal, the less the level of support you can probably expect. And so one of the goals of the survey was to make it really clear that bonds mean taxes, just in case they missed that part out of that 75-word ballot statement. And we wanted to understand kind of how tax rate sensitive your voters are with respect to this proposal and how they react to different ways of talking about the tax implications of a bond. So we did that first by testing 3 different possible tax rates that could be associated with the proposal. $24 per 100,000 assessed valuation, which is that top rate. If anybody was anything other than a definitely yes, we would then test the next rate down and so on. That's called a Dutch auction, where you start high and you go low. It's proven to be the most effective way at figuring out where the sort of jumping in point is for individuals when it comes to these types of proposals. So you can see that we do see a bit of tax rate sensitivity. At that initial ballot test, we had 56% support when the $24 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate was built into that package. When you pull that price tag out and you set it aside and you focus voters' attention on it, support dips down to 52%. As you lower the tax rate, support builds back up such that at that $16 per 100,000 of assessed valuation tax rate, we see about 58% support. Now, I get to do this for a lot of districts around the state and have done this for decades. And one of the things we know about this question is that it tends to be a pretty conservative read on voter support for your proposal for a couple of reasons. Number one is we are putting the blinders on a respondent and we are focusing their attention on the price tag. You think about a bond proposal, it's a package, right? It's all the things you're going to be doing with the funds. And a part of that package is the price tag. By pulling the price tag out, setting it aside, and focusing voters' attention on it, it tends to be a bit of a wet blanket on support for a proposal in an artificial way. The other reason, though, we know that this question tends to be produce a somewhat conservative read on support for proposal is because the tax rate isn't necessarily accessible to every voter, right? When I say that, you know, this proposal would raise the property taxes on your home by $24 per 100,000 assessed valuation, you need to know what assessed valuation is. You need to have some estimate of what the AV is for your property. You've got to be able to do math pretty quickly in the space of the interview to be able to turn that into a meaningful number. And understandably, not everybody is good at that. And so we know there's some voters who hedge at this question. They will tend to say, no, we're not sure, rather than yes, because they know you're talking price tag, they just don't know what it adds up to. And so we also come about it differently on the next slide. We say, all right, let me put it another way. If you knew that this measure would cost the typical homeowner $212 per year, that's the left column there, would you vote yes or no? The $212 per year is that $24 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate multiplied times the median assessed valuation for a residential property in your district. So it's what that middle property owner would pay. Those are comparable numbers. And you can see that when you go ahead and do the math for folks and they understand the true sort of annual cost, you get a more positive reaction to the tax rate information. When we talked about it as a rate at $24 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, we had 52% support. When you just do the math for folks and tell them that's $212 per year for the typical owner, it jumps up to 57%. Same exercise in the column on the right, only here we're annualizing that $16 per 100,000 assessed valuation tax rate for the median owner. That turns into $141 per year. And at $141 per year, we have 60% support. All of this information is just helpful for you as a board making what's probably the second toughest decision that you ever have to make when it comes to bond measures. The first one is, do we go? And the second one is, where do you price it? So after the tax threshold section, we get into what we call the projects and improvement section. Here is where we're trying to do two things. One is we are now starting to educate this respondent more about what this measure would accomplish than we could convey in that initial ballot test, which only had 75 words, and about maybe half of those words were devoted to projects. Here we get to unpack it into all the various potential uses, and in that way, we're giving respondents a better idea about what this measure is about. The other thing it allows us to do is understand of all the ways you could spend the money, how do your voters feel about each of those ways, and which of these sort of rise to the top of the list in terms of their priorities. You can see here that everything we tested on the list had majorities. A majority of voters say that they would favor spending some of that the money on that item, and all but one of the items had 70+% of voters say that they would favor spending some of the money on that item. And so lots of the things that you're thinking about doing with this bond are popular. If you look at the top of the list, though, there's a few things that sort of rise to the top of the list in your district that also tend to rise to the top of the list in other districts that are looking at bond measures. Basic repairs to your facilities, roofs, plumbing, sewer, electrical lines that need to be updated. That's your number one. any hazardous materials. You have older facilities, you're going to run into asbestos, you're going to run into lead pipes. When you encounter those things, voters will like those gone. And then career tech and STEM, right? Anything that's associated with those two tends to test very well. So if you as a board choose to move forward with a measure, there's going to be an election cycle. And during that election cycle, there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate in your community about this proposal. You'll undoubtedly have some folks in the community stand up and advocate on behalf of this measure, talk to their neighbors and friends about why this is needed and why they should vote yes. You might also get some opponents. People step up, say it's a terrible idea and we shouldn't be doing it, and here's why. For this survey to be a reliable gauge of the feasibility of a bond measure, we need to simulate that discussion and debate in the space of the poll so that we not only know where are you on the natural, which was that initial ballot test, but what happens to support for your proposal once voters encounter positive arguments and negative arguments. So we do that by first testing a series of positive arguments that you see here. You can see a lot of these arguments get traction with your voters. The number one at the top of the list is an interesting one. When you talk about portable replacement just as a project and don't provide any details, it tends to be kind of a low-level priority for voters. In some ways, it almost sounds wasteful. Like, wait a minute, we have a classroom and we're replacing this classroom? Why is that? But when you can explain what a 25-year portable often looks like, right? And in your case, you have 241 of these. It's a game changer with voters. They understand. Okay, now I get it. Why we have to, replace these units. So shown here are the positive arguments we tested, and again, you see a lot of them get traction. So at this point in the poll, voters have heard more about your proposal than they did initially. We dug in on the tax rates after the initial ballot test, and as we saw, that tends to be a bit of a wet blanket on support for the proposal. But we also had a chance to elaborate on the types of projects that could be funded and conveyed positive arguments on behalf of the proposal. So we circle to what we call our interim ballot test. Here's where we present that same 75 words and we say, now that you've heard a bit more about this proposal, where do you stand? You can see that at the interim ballot test, we have 62% of support for this proposal, 33% opposed, and about 4% unsure. What has happened here is a lot of those unsure voters, of which we had 13% at the initial ballot test, they have migrated to one of these camps. We are now sitting about 7 points north of that 55% threshold that you need for passage of a Prop 39 bond. And then we get to the negatives. And the idea behind the negatives is we're going to pressure test voter support for your proposal by peppering them with a series of negative arguments, the types of negative arguments we can expect that they could encounter during an election cycle. Because we want to have kind of a realistic understanding of if you were to move forward and should you get opposition and should they be reasonably effective at getting their message out, how might that impact voter support for the proposal? So shown here are the negatives that we tested. You can see a lot of these are getting some traction. The real question though is what happens afterwards, and that is here. So at the final ballot test, we had 57% support for this proposal, 38% opposed, and you've got about 6% who were unsure. So we're sitting about 2 points north of that 55% threshold at the final ballot test. That's about a 5-point drop from where we were at the interim ballot test. So what does all this mean? I've just got a couple wrap-up slides here. I'm going to circle back first to that overarching question I mentioned at the outset, which is that is a motivator for why you do this research, which is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible, right? If you as a board were to choose to move forward with a November with a November bond measure, does it have a reasonable chance of success? These are kind of tough numbers. And I think the answer to that question is a yes, but, right? Yes, there is a potential path to a viable measure in this November. It is steep, it is rocky, it's a little easy to fall off of it, but it's there. But it would also require some adjustments to your proposal. It would require some very robust outreach and engagement in a short amount of time to be viable. And the bottom line is it's not without risk, right? Even if you were to do all those things very well, you are still at risk of having it not be successful in November. So why the yes part? Well, that's everything that's under the positive signs here, right? It's encouraging that voters consider improving the quality of education in local schools to be the most important issue facing the community. We saw that based just on that 75-word ballot statement, initial support for the bond was sufficient, right? You need 55%. We were sitting at 56%. What you're proposing to do with the bond in terms of projects was well received by voters, right? Those were popular projects. And you've got some positive arguments that resonate with voters as to reasons for why they would consider voting yes on this proposal. And importantly, at each point in the interview, when we circled back to respondent, we presented that same 75-word ballot statement, said, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? At each one of those ballot statements, we were north of the 55% threshold required for passage. So that's the kind of pattern that we want to see in place for a measure to have a reasonable chance of success. The but part has everything to do with what you're seeing there in the challenges. Number one, we did see some tax rate sensitivity, right? The moment the conversation sort of focused on the price tag, support was cooling down for this proposal. We also saw that the opposition arguments resonated, right? That although we hit a number just north of 60% at the interim ballot test, once we had exposed voters to a handful of those opposition arguments, it cooled right back down and we landed at 57%, which is also, by the way, within the margin of error of the 55 that's required for passage. The biggest issue really is the third bullet, and that is the electoral climate that we're expecting this November. You know, a lot of districts focus on these high turnout presidential general elections because in what they find in their case is that with that expanded turnout, they're bringing to the polls a lot of voters that are more tax friendly. And so by having a high turnout, it really increases their chances of passage. The problem with these high turnout elections, though, is sometimes, although it's true, you get the benefit of the turnout, you also wind up sort of encountering some of the challenges that are associated with these types of elections. And in this case, I think there's two main ones. One is that the hyper partisanship that we're going to see. I mean, this presidential, we've seen some really partisan elections the last two cycles. This one's going to set a new bar for it. And it's going to be a bitter, hyper partisan presidential election that's kind of going to set the tone. And what we tend to find is that creates some challenges for local measures because these aren't partisan measures, right? These are about your community and your schools. But the more these partisan drumbeats start getting louder and louder as we get towards election day, what happens is a lot of voters start just looking at everything through partisan lenses, and that usually creates some challenges for local measures. The other thing we have going on this November is some statewide measures that are going to create sort of a loud discussion and debate statewide about taxes and will generate some anti-tax sentiment that could create some headwinds, again, for measures down ballot. And so, you know, the bottom line is these are the kind of numbers that say, yes, there is a potential path, but it's going to be challenging. And I frankly wouldn't feel comfortable recommending that you move forward because it wouldn't take much adversity for this measure to wind up being underwater at 55. Now, having said that, part of the reason why this makes it easier for your district is when you dig into these numbers and you shrink your turnout and you look at what, say, a potential 2026 bond would look like, that scenario actually looks pretty good. You are unique as a district in that as you shrink your turnout, you're really not getting a large difference in how voters view your proposal. It's only about a 2-point difference. A lot of districts I work with, it's a double-digit difference between the high turnout and a low turnout election in terms of natural support for your proposal. We aren't seeing that in your bond. And so that opens up 2026 as a pretty good opportunity. And the nice thing about 2026 is it does a few things in terms of the environment. Number one, it's going to be less partisan, right? We're not going to have a presidential contest. It's going to be a statewide gubernatorial. It just will be less partisan than this November. There's a lot less noise, right? I mean, there's so many measures on the ballot and so many candidates run this November that it's really hard to get your message through what is going to be just a really loud, noisy election. You're also likely to have fewer measures on the ballot. That means less competition and less controversy than we're see potentially this November. And importantly, and this is really the big one, it gives you time, right? You have time to prepare a measure for the ballot. And whereas right now you're, knocking on the door of, a month and a half before the filing deadline, right? So which gives you very little time. If you look to 2026, it gives you time to prepare adequately. And so with that final slide here, a couple of thoughts. One, it's always important to keep in mind that a survey like this is a snapshot in time. right? It's not a crystal ball looking forward to election day saying you're going to get 57% on election day. It tells you where you are today with your voters. It tells you how they tend to react to the types of information that they could encounter during an election cycle. But ultimately, what dictates what happens on election day isn't what your poll says today. It's sort of everything that happens from this point forward. So it's kind of a reminder that you always want to be making smart decisions about your measure, how you craft it so it's consistent with the type of measure your community is said that they're interested in supporting. And you're going to have to put the work in when you do decide to put a bond on the ballot in terms of communication. That's both from the district side, right? Those non-advocacy communications, giving voters the basic facts and helping raise their awareness about what your facility needs are and how they connect to the quality of education in your schools. And also there will have to be an independent campaign that would sort of shepherd this measure through the election cycle. That's the group that can actually advocate on behalf of this proposal, but it's volunteer-led and privately funded. So that is the end of my presentation, my slides. I welcome questions from the board if there are any.
Thank you. Trustees, do you have any questions? Trustee Barto?
Yes, I just had a couple of questions. For the ones about how the surveys are done, and then two is the positive arguments. For how the survey is done, when you do these, we're two different cities, and we're unique in that way as a district. Do you try to take a representative sample across the two cities? How does that work?
I'm sorry, I can't hear your mic.
Speak right.
I mean, I can hear it, but it's so faint that I can't pick it up on my end.
We've got two mics. So
That's
for
better,
your
whichever
survey
that one
methods,
is.
How do you conduct them? Because we are unique as a district, and we are two cities. So do you take a representative sample from both cities?
Oh yeah. So we think about this in terms of when I say stratified and clustered, what we do is we take all the voters in your district and we stratify them by certain variables that are real drivers. One of which is subgeography, obviously household, party type, partisanship, age, gender, and we break them down and we create clusters of certain profiles such that, for example, if 5% of your district are Democratic females who live with another Democrat, who are between 50 and 60 years of age and live in a particular part of your district, 5% of our clusters match that profile. And then we randomly select people into their appropriate clusters. This is how we can ensure that at the end of this process, our sample is a perfect match to your likely November universe on all those dimensions, and geography is one of them.
And the other question, because I know in one of our cities, the property taxes are higher, therefore the bond rate is going to be higher. So I know we have a lot of opposition from my voters. They will do the math when it comes to the bond, so thank you for kind of understanding that sentiment. Did you, in any way, shape, or form, kind of bring that up, or was it just the 141 versus the 212?
So the way it works is we look at all the properties within your district in terms of their assessed valuation. And this is not market rate, right? It's the amount that the property is taxed on. And so, my dad loves to rub it in. He's owned his house for 40 years. And even though his house is probably worth about the same as mine, he pays about 1/10 the taxes that I do because of Prop 13, right? What we did is we looked at the actual assessed valuation for every property within the district. And then we took the median of that, which is the middle one. And we're just trying to anchor it for somebody so that they understand, what does $24 per 100,000 of assessed valuation mean, right? Well, it's going to mean a little different amount to every property based on what their AV is. But by picking that middle one, it sort of anchors it and gives them an idea of what the typical owner would pay.
My last question is related to the positive arguments. I think it's really interesting that the replacement of portable classrooms ranked higher than working on the buildings themselves that need to be updated with standards. Have you seen that data before?
I think it has to do with kind of the bottom line is yes, I have seen that. Portables tend to be one of those projects that, when they understand what a 25-year portable looks like, it really is kind of a game changer in how they view that type of a project. And so you're talking about taking sort of older, decrepit portables that are expensive to repair and keep putting Band-Aids on and replacing them with, permanent classrooms that are new and up to today's academic standards. That's very common, that's a positive thing. But when I look down, again, when you look at your projects, there's a lot of projects on your list that test really well, right? All but one of them had 70+% support. The only one that didn't is the installing outdoor shade structures. And I'll tell you that that's also a pattern we see a lot. And that is if you're at your schools and you're a parent or you're a student or teacher and you see that need, it often comes up a lot when you do your school site sort of assessments and evaluations. But most of the voters out there, they don't have kids currently in your school. They haven't stepped on your campuses in a long time. And, if you stack up that against, instructional technology or career tech or STEM, it just doesn't rank in the same way.
Yeah, I think that we who have kids in the schools hear about the shade structures all the time, but I know the majority of voters are either have kids in the schools or have had them recently. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trustee Wigand?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple questions about some of the initial ballot tests and just those ballot tests. Is why do you give people even an opportunity to say not sure? Why don't you make them and force them to answer one of these, because that's what's going to be on the ballot. It's not going to be yes, no, or I guess not sure is you just don't answer that. You just don't check a box for that question. But why do we even give them not sure?
So a couple of thoughts. One, some pollsters will take a little bit of a different practice with this. That is, if someone says not sure, they'll say, well, which way are you leaning? Right? Are you leaning yes or are you leaning no? And they'll kind of try and get that gauge. What found systematically, though, is that has a tendency to artificially inflate your yes vote, right? And so I want to know where somebody's at, because I also know I'm going to take them through a 15-minute interview, right? And so I want to know in the beginning, do they have an opinion on this? If so, what is it? And if someone tells me they're not sure, I take them at their word, right? And so rather than kind of ask them to lean one way or the other, because it also gives me a much cleaner read on what the true yes vote is out there, because I tend to think of yes and everything else as a not yes. And empirically, when I line my polling up against what we see, on election day, and I've been doing this for decades, you tend to find that that's the most accurate way for kind of understanding where the true yes vote is.
Okay. And then from the initial ballot test to the interim ballot test to the final ballot test, what one actually is the performance of what it would actually look like on election day? Because obviously, as you go from initial ballot till final, you've educated the.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, if you walk into an election and you're going to have your advocacy group out there and you can expect some opposition, the final ballot test is your best marker, right? That's your best estimate. Occasionally, we work with districts where, they move forward with a bond, they get no opposition, there are no arguments against, it's just quiet on that side. And they tend to perform more towards where they are at the interim ballot test. And so it's those two. The reason why the initial one is really important to get like that is it kind of tells you where you are today, right? So sometimes what we'll find is, like in your case, we start out at 56, but then we actually dip in the hole with the tax rate discussion, but then climb back out of there and get up above 60 at the interim, right, before you hit opposition. So that's useful information. It kind of tells us, hey, the more your voters know about what your facility needs are, and they understand kind of the arguments on behalf of this proposal, we not only get back to level where we were at the initial ballot test, we go beyond, which is great. And then obviously the opposition arguments are tested to understand, should you get some opposition, and I think you could expect that in a November election, how does that ultimately impact support for your proposal? So that's why we do it 3 times, and we sequence them the way we do in our surveys.
Thank you. And then one more question. In your sampling,
of the 500 and so participants, did you ever ask a question, do you have kids in the school district?
We did ask that question. That's something you can't pick up off the voter file. And so we like to ask it. And what we have is 23% of your likely November universe said that they currently have a child in the Newport-Mesa Unified School District. We had about another 12% who said they have one or more kids in private school. And so that's pretty typical of what we're seeing, not so much on the private school side, but on the public school side, that, you know, you get anywhere from 20 to 30% of your likely voters are going to be parents.
And then do you know how they voted on if they decided to say yes on the those that had children in the schools? Did they say yes for the bond measure, or how did they respond?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting this cycle, what we've been seeing in the last couple of cycles. So let me get to the initial ballot test here. What we've been seeing is you kind of have this idea that, oh, of course, current parents are going to have to be the strongest supporters, right? And what you find, interestingly enough, in yours at the initial ballot test, current parents checked in at 52%, past parents, so they had kids go through your schools, don't currently have kids in your school, 53%. And the folks who have never had a child move through your school district are at 63%. So at first that sounds really odd, right? What the no-never group is, though, it tends to skew younger, right? So these are your younger voters. They either don't have kids or they have kids, but they aren't actually into your district schools yet. They're not old enough. That group, being younger, also tends to be much more supportive of these proposals. And so that's what's kind of happening there. But we're not seeing that current parents are out there sort of carrying the flag. And it's not just your district. We're seeing this all over the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Anderson and then Trustee Pearson, in that order.
Okay, thank you. I have one question that I'll ask, and then I have some questions for Jeff for after when we
I I really can't hear you very well. I apologize.
There weren't any questions about any of our previous bonds we had done. It was interesting to me that one of the arguments was actually the lowest, it looked like, was something about like not trusting what the district or any government agency would do with money. And so I thought that was interesting, that question wasn't asked, but then also that was rated the least, which is good. But I just was wondering about like a local control question also. I didn't see any questions about that. Is there anything specifically, because I saw one of the challenges was about statewide initiatives or, you know, the hyper-partisanship piece, rather than, you know, this would be locally controlled by citizen oversight. Was there a question like that?
I apologize, but your mic in particular is, I can't hear you. I get little snippets here and there. Is it possible that someone with a stronger mic could repeat that? I apologize.
For the love. That was a lot to ask. I don't remember all the people. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. The first part of my question was I didn't see anything about previous bonds or previous things that we as a district or, you know, one of these, if the cities or anyone had done bonds, any questions about that, which I thought was interesting because I think that would be indicative of some people's responses if they felt like they had already been paying for bonds. And it looked like the negative argument, the one that was ranked lowest, the least amount of people were concerned about not trusting government agencies about money. And is that standard? Is that something you typically see?
So let me respond to that if you would. So we did have a negative, it's kind of in the middle of the pack there on that slide, about residents are already paying too many taxes, state and county taxes, school bonds, and other taxes. There's also going to be a lot of new tax proposals on the November ballot. Enough is enough. We can't afford to keep raising our taxes, right? So we didn't call out a specific bond or from the past, and it's been a long time since your district's passed one, or other agencies. We sort of lumped it together and just talked about and gave examples of all the different types of tax measures that are in play out there right now. So we definitely hit that in the negatives. The other thing about we can't trust the district with this tax. Like all agencies, they will mismanage the money. There's a certain kind of I don't trust government sentiment out there for some voters, and sometimes they will when you kind of throw them that argument, they're naturally going to kind of latch onto it, right? But what's interesting is even though that you get a kind of a strong reaction to the negatives in that spot of the survey, the real question again is what happens at the final ballot test? How much does the act of conveying these 5 different negatives ultimately depress support? And that was about 5%.
Okay. Yeah, it was interesting to see that number that was lower considering the demographics of people that were asked. And that kind of leads into my next question about local control. There wasn't a question that I saw specifically where it was at the beginning, but there wasn't a question about would you feel more comfortable if there was citizen oversight, if there was audit, there weren't any questions like that. Have you felt that can sometimes have an impact?
There were a couple in the positive arguments that get at that. For example, the measure by law requires transparent system of accountability, a project list describing how the money will be used, citizens oversight committee, and public disclosure of how all funds will be spent. It's also, we use the argument that all the money raised by the measure will stay local to support students. It can't be taken away by the state or used for other reasons. So, those accountability arguments that sort of give voters who may be a bit tax adverse and may not trust government in general, that's when you look at the Prop 39 protections that are part of those types of bonds, like the Citizens Oversight Committee, the disclosure of how all funds are spent, that kind of thing. It kind of gives them some reassurances if they were to vote yes, their dollars would be well spent.
Much.
Trustee Pearson and then Trustee Ursulou.
Jeff, this might be for you, but can you clarify the $250 million that we can get from the state? Is it true that if we don't float the bond that we don't get the $250 million, or we can't apply for that?
So that $250 million is based on 2 projects, and we wouldn't have enough money to complete those projects without a bond or some other financing method to get that. To $250 million, you have to do those projects, and it only pays for about half of it. So without having the money to complete the entire project, we wouldn't be able to start on it.
Okay, thank you. So Trustee Ursulou.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Can you give us a little bit of insight in your experience? What do you foresee as the biggest difference in the voter profile between the presidential 2024 and what 2026 will look like? Will the voters be older? Will they be more Republican, less Republican? What is the exact difference in the profile that makes you more confident in 26?
So it's partly profile. Certainly, as you shrink turnout in most communities, what you will wind up with is a somewhat older, right? Somewhat more likely to be a homeowner, somewhat more conservative voter, which in general winds up with being less tax friendly, right? And so in some communities that shift makes a huge, and there's a big difference between their high turnout elections and their lower turnout elections in terms of just the turnout. So they lose a lot of bodies, and in that process, that whole electorate shifts demographically in the way as I just mentioned, and that tends to make it a more challenging playing field for a potential measure. What's interesting about your district is, number one, you just don't see as much fall off, right? And just in terms of raw bodies, you're not losing as many people between what we're going to see this presidential general election and what you're going to see in, say, the November 2026 election. So that's part of the reason why we aren't seeing as big of a difference. Yes, we do see some of those other factors at play. But the real thing I'm looking at is when I look at the propensity, like if I flag somebody based on them being a high propensity voter, meaning they're the kind of voter that's going to show up in not just in November of 2024, they're also going to show up in November of 2026. Their support levels for this measure were just 2 points less than what we're expecting of the entire electorate this November. And so that's unusual to only have a 2-point fall off between a presidential, general, and a gubernatorial. And that's why I was, when we look at the data and we think about everything else that's going on this November, that won't be so much of a challenge in 2026. That's why I think, you have an opportunity in 2026 that some districts don't, right? I've had conversations with a number of districts where, okay, if we don't go this November of 24, they're really looking at November of 28.
Okay. Tim, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you're on a time limit because we're running late. Are you okay with staying on?
Yeah, I probably have another 10 minutes.
Give us like a time allowance just so we can pace ourselves.
Yeah, I think I've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay. So we have Trustee Murphy, Anderson, and then I have a couple of questions. And then we're, yeah.
Actually, this question is really more for Jeff. Sorry, so I'll go quickly. Jeff, if we waited 2 years, though, wouldn't that make the projects more expensive?
Yes.
And I guess to clarify Trustee Pearson's question, so for the 2 projects that need the $250 million, there's a possibility of a $250 million match from the state?
That's correct. Yeah, so it's about a 50% match.
For those 2 projects. And there's pretty much no other way to get that money.
Well, there would be a certificates of participation, which the district could look at. That's just a borrowing.
For those 2 projects. And then for, what about the rest of the facilities needs and upgrades and safety measures and all of the rest of it? I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about that we've had so many requests for so many different facilities upgrades. How else would we pay for it?
There's really no other option other than to pay as we go, and we simply prioritize those projects, and as we have money, we would complete them.
And then I guess my question then to Tim would be, couldn't you, isn't that part of the way you leverage this conversation? Is that we couldn't do this?
Trustee Murphy, just so, can we ask him if we have any Tim questions?
I just did.
Okay.
I didn't catch that last part. I'm sorry if it was directed at me.
Tim, one way to leverage this conversation is about the fact that the district wouldn't be able to pay for these projects moving forward, and that they would exponentially go up in cost.
So that is, certainly an argument that you can make on behalf of a proposal. When we tested arguments like that, they tend not to resonate at the same level that sort of just are messages that really kind of focus on the facility needs themselves, right? So anytime you start to hover around costs, right, and whether that's the cost of the bond or the cost of going up on facilities, it just tends to get you out in a part of the conversation where it's probably more of defensive arguments as opposed to, playing offense in terms of your messaging. The other challenge, obviously, is time, right? That what you're describing, I think, is true, that you can, that's a message you might want to run with, but at the same time, you need to have the time to be able to convey that. And that's one of the other challenges we have right now, because here we are at June 25th, and, the filing, realistically, you've got about a month, right, before you're going to have to take action on a measure, and there's just not a lot of time to get that message out, or any other message in that respect.
Okay, Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. This is kind of a twofer for perhaps Jeff, but I'm not sure. When was the last time that residents were taxed on our last measure? On Measure F? 2000.
Measure F is still out there, and I believe it's at about $16 and some change, which people are being taxed per $100,000 of assessed value currently.
And when will that end?
About 2038.
Okay. And for the piece that I had heard a concern about was connected to the items that are on that. It seemed that there was perhaps a misunderstanding in the community about what the Measure F items were, particularly since a lot of the people who were being asked in this are not connected to our schools. And so one concern that I had heard was about deferred maintenance. And a lot of the items on Measure F were about theaters, fields. They weren't these critical infrastructure. They weren't student and site safety things that I think we have been prioritizing as needs. And so for me, that makes the conversation much different. Do we have a number that you could perhaps provide the board? Because I know deferred maintenance has been something that was not prioritized in Measure F, a number that we could see. I know we got some of that from the facilities master plan, but a specific number that is separate from this 250 for those two sites.
So are you asking the question of the total amount of deferred maintenance which the district is dealing with?
Yes. Or if you could provide it to us soon, because I know that number is quite high.
Yeah, it's in the hundreds of millions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have a couple of questions. So one, you surveyed 535 registered voters. How many of those were renters? Because typically renters do not have the tax liability. So they have a different perspective on a bond.
Yeah, so looking at homeowners versus renters, you've got about 53% owners, 47% renters within your total district based on, that's how they answered our polling. The voter file on the natural doesn't have an owner-renter field. We have enhanced voter files that we've cross-referenced it against the assessor's file. It's not perfect. It's usually about a 90% correct match, but based on these numbers, it's a little more than half were owners.
Okay, and then you also mentioned that a big factor, in addition to hyper politics, partisanship, is what is going to be on the ballot as far as initiatives. And I know that the state legislature is looking at a state facility. It's like AB 247, and then there's also a climate one that's SB 638. Are those one of the two that you were thinking of when you mentioned that there are initiatives that will be on the November ballot?
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be lots of other measures on the ballot, some of which your voters will see, some of which they won't because they're going to be on, in other jurisdictions. The one that I was actually thinking more about is what was ACA 1, what is now, I understand, to be ACA 10, where they are looking at, it doesn't affect schools, but they essentially want to do for other public agencies what Prop 39 did for schools, right? It used to be that school districts would pass bonds at 2/3, right? It was Prop 39 that allows school districts to pass bonds at 55%. No other agencies have that luxury. And ACA 10 would essentially do that for bonds for other types of agencies like cities and counties and special jurisdictions. So if that goes on the ballot, and we expect it to, it's just going to be, you're going to get a loud discussion statewide about, should we be making taxes easier to pass or harder to pass, et cetera, et cetera. And so that just kind of creates its own weather system. And that could create some headwinds for local measures.
Okay, thank you. So it just looks like you don't feel comfortable recommending us, and you are saying that 2026 looks better. As we shrink turnout, our constituents are still interested in showing up and voting for a bond, and whether it's, even if it's an off-presidential cycle. And I think I see why. It's because on page 4 of your report, it shows that our constituents value improving the quality of education in local public schools as very high at 86%. So that probably plays a factor in your conclusion.
So, and I'm sorry, you were a little faint, but I think I picked it up. You are correct that when I look at the two opportunities you have in front of you, one is this immediate opportunity for November of 2024. The other is really looking out to 2026. I think you're one of those unusual districts because the support levels among your high propensity voters is similar to your lower propensity voters, that you have both of those at play. And when you have that situation, given what all the conditions that we think are going to make November of this year challenging, particularly because you're getting a late start, I think the better, smarter play is to focus on November 2026 and start that process earlier, and preparing for a measure, to look at a potential measure then. I think I'd hate to see you move forward this November. And these poll results, although we're a little bit above 55, there's no wiggle room here, right? There's no buffer, which means that this measure is really susceptible to kind of these external factors and forces that you can't control as a district. When I recommend a district to move forward, I want to see that they've got some numbers there where they can kind of control their fate a little more, right? And these numbers aren't there, right? When it comes to this November. And so that's why knowing that this plan B of 2026 is an attractive alternative, I think that's the better play.
Okay, thank you. All right. We are done with, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, for your
Thank you, I appreciate it. Have a
contribution
great
tonight.
night.
We move on to item 19, the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. As amended, remember, because we
Yes, as
amended it
Yeah,
to move.
we moved two items to 20 GNF. So trustee Wygand moved it, and do I have a second?
Second.
All right, trustee Pearson seconded. Let's have a vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Wygand?
Yes.
Trustee Soilu?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
Great, it's unanimous. We move on to item 20, which is discussion action calendar, and 20A is to approve 2024-2025 student board members. Trustee
All right.
Wygand?
Well, after some interviews and conversing with trustees, we have come up with 6 new student board members for the 2024-2025 school year. And they're not here today, but we will physically introduce them on our August meeting once school is back in session. So they are from Back Bay High School. We have 2, Isaac Stone and Michelle Mendoza. And that is due to Isaac Stone is graduating in December. So we're going to have 2, so Michelle can finish out the year. And then at Corona Del Mar High School, we have Gannon Overfelt. Costa Mesa High School, India Howland. Early College High School, Audrey High School, Devoni Booster. Newport Harbor High School, Brianna Garcia. And then our Monte Vista High School, who is at their school and wants to participate in the fall. So we congratulate them, and we look forward to all of their input that they will have for us in the next school year.
Okay, great. So do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Trustee Murphy is moved, and do we have a second?
Second.
Trustee Pearson seconds the motion. Roll call vote, please.
Oh, can I have a discussion real quick?
Oh, of course. Yes.
I was just going to suggest that maybe in the future we amend our policy or process or whatever to start advertising maybe January, February, because I feel like as much as I love our student board members, I want to give as many opportunities for people, and I know it gets really crowded and busy with things near the end of the year. So I'm hopeful that by advertising in like January, like maybe we get a broader range of applicants.
Okay. That's a good recommendation. Trustee Anderson.
Yes, I agree. I actually would like to request that we do it perhaps at the beginning of the school year. I think one of the reasons we have student board members is to democratize student voice. And I know that the intent was not necessarily to have people for 2 years. I think somehow between the conversation and the initial start of having student board members and the COVID times and coming back from that and having some of our different challenges, some of the sites maybe did not understand what we were looking for. And so I just want to make sure going forward that it's more clear that we're explaining that we would prefer 1-year terms, that the point is when you have a school of 2,500 people, you're hearing from multiple people. I think that the 2 that we have that are repeating are great, but we also have a student who didn't apply again because he thought it was for 1 year, and I don't think that's fair. So I just want to make sure going forward that we have a system in place, that we have a clear board policy about what a student board member is, that every site is not doing their own program and system. So I really appreciate having them. I just think we need to be fair and have a system. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's my understanding in our board policy that we don't choose the process of selecting a student board member from the site. What we do is we take their applications, whoever they are, and then we act on it.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just sometimes it's hard to get applications at the end of the year because everyone's in AP tests and the kinds of kids who I think put themselves forth to be student board members are also crazy busy in April and May. And so maybe if we opened it up earlier, people who aren't our typical student board member might want to apply because they have time.
And we might want to reach out to the schools too to see if maybe they would prefer it if we pick that student board member in the beginning of the year for that new year.
Yeah.
When everyone's fresh and looking for things to put on their college applications. That might be cool too.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That was actually my idea for this year when I saw what was happening, was to possibly just, I mean, I was contemplating voting no on this overall. I know that we've already spoken to our board members, and so I wouldn't want to do that, but I just think it's really important that we have fair processes and they're clear and we're not giving another job to the school site. I think we weren't anticipating that at the beginning. It wasn't supposed to be something else, but we need a clear person at each site who is promoting it among students. Thank you.
Okay, so Trustee Anderson, so I get it clear. So you're recommending that we contact the principals, like the site leaders, maybe like in August or July, and have them recruit or not recruit, but advertise the position in August when school opens?
Yeah, I mean, so the beginning part, when we were coming up with the initial policies, it was a new program, right? And so we were leaning on the principals and staff to share what the program was.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that way as much anymore. And so if we want to review it perhaps when we have our board governance, I think that would be great. But yeah, I think the communication doesn't have to necessarily go through the principal. If it's best for the ASB to announce it, I'm not specific about who's doing it. I just think the sites need to make sure they're doing it, because if we're not having people apply, that's not happening. Thank you.
Do I have to do this?
Trustee Pearson.
I think that August might be a little too early. I like the idea of December, January, because I think we'll have a lot of turnover and we would just be redoing this over and over again. And Krista, thank you for all that you did, because I got to sit in on some of the interviews and they're fantastic.
So should we have this discussion through the policy committee so you can put it in writing and update our policy for student board member appointments? Or, because I don't see it fitting necessarily in our governance study session. It probably makes more sense to look at the policy itself and then have a discussion in the policy committee.
That sounds good.
What do y'all think?
Yeah.
All right, so you know who you are. So
we'll
let's get that on the schedule with Sam, and you can have a good discussion.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So are we ready? Let's go for the vote.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. Congratulations to our school board, student board members of 24-25. 20B, adopt a local control and accountability plan, also known as LCAP. Ms. Shields, Dr. Shields.
This is the second act. We'll take it this month. You heard the presentation 2 weeks ago about the LCAP, have had time to see it, and this is the formal act required before we submit it to the county office for county office approval.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve, to adopt 20B?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have Trustee Barto making the motion and Dr. Soilu seconding it. And roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Move on to 20C, which is approve the LCAP federal addendum. Adopt the local control and accountability plan. And Dr. Shields.
Similarly, this is the second stage of approval, the approval process prior to sending it further down the county line for compliance agreement with the state.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Trustee
Second.
Weigand and a second by Trustee Ursulou. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
It is unanimous. Question, Trustee Anderson.
I'm like, it's hiding behind the
I know,
Phoenix box
yeah.
on my area. Can you see it? I'm not sure. I just wanted to ask that we could set up time for trustees to meet with the wonderful Vanessa Gailey to go over the LCAP for next year. I learned a lot having board members in small groups discuss that, and so I would love to start that back up again. So I thought that was really valuable. Thank you.
And we can do it through Zoom, right? Make it, give options. All right, thank you. So we'll move on to 20D, which is approve SELPA local plan services plan and SELPA annual budget plan for the 24-25 school year. Dr. Jochum?
Thank you. As presented at the last board meeting, we have our annual service plan and our annual budget plan as a single district SELPA for your approval this evening.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Trustee Pearson?
Second.
And Trustee Pearson made the motion and Trustee Murphy seconded it. Roll call vote?
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, unanimous. Moving on to 20E, approve secondary textbook for public display. Assistant Superintendent Torres.
Yes, in front of you tonight is the approval of the AP Human Geography textbook. And so every so often, the publishers will update their books, and that's what you have in front of you tonight and why we're opening the public display.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Weigand moved it and seconded by Trustee, was it Anderson? Okay, roll call vote. Oh, who was it? Trustee, did you have a question or is that from?
I think that was for.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call vote?
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, it is unanimous. We move on to 20F. It's a little lengthy. First review of the revised Newport-Mesa Unified School District Board Policies, Index 1218, Newport-Mesa Unified School District Board 000 Series, Philosophy, Goals, Objectives, and Comprehensive Plans 1000 Series, Community Relations 2000 Series, Administration 3000 Series, Business and Non-Instructional Operations 5000 Series, Students 6000 Series, Instruction 7000 Series, Facilities. Dr. Smith.
Yes, the school boards, one of their major roles is developing policy. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of policies in the district. If they're not updated regularly, they can fall out of compliance, technically and legally be inaccurate. As it turns out in this district, we haven't done this process in quite a while, 2009. So you can imagine how the laws and other codes have changed. CSBA has a process called the global adoption where they bring in their experts who work with their attorneys, and then we get staff together to look at this. 3 days, riveting. It's a great 3 days together. And we have several options to go with what the district has if it is compliant with the law, to make technical edits if they are to be made that then make it compliant with the law, or if the district doesn't have that policy and it's mandated or required in some other way because we have a program, et cetera, then we can adopt CSBA's policies. So we did that process, I mentioned, over 3 days. This is the first read for the trustees to look at these. We'll be bringing this back again at the end of next month for a second read and any subsequent reads depending on the board. I would also mention that this does not in any way preclude the board and, more importantly, the board's policy committee to at any point say, no, we'd like to take these and look at these again. So even after the global adoption, that policy committee always has the opportunity to identify those. And then finally, we looked at the policies, all of them, and if it was something the board had mentioned they had an interest in, we didn't take it up as staff, and we leave that for the policy committee to do their first read. So they're before you.
All right.
So moved.
Any comments? Trustee Anderson, did you have a comment?
She moved.
Okay, so you said
Second.
so moved. All right. Trustee Anderson moved and seconded by, was it Barto? Or Soilu? All right. Roll call vote, please. Oh, any questions?
Just to clarify, these are ones that tie into Ed Code where we've fallen out of compliance with Ed Code, and I have 35 days to read through these hundreds of policies.
That's right.
All right, great.
Yeah, I would say Ed Code, but there are other, codes as well that could apply as they change titles. Some of the titles in California change. We like to keep it creative, and so then we make sure the titles are reflective of those changes. But mostly Ed Code and technical edits like that. Again, we don't want the public to lose this. The board has an opportunity at every meeting to bring these forward. If there's ever an issue brought forward by the public or your constituents wherein you question any of those policies.
Thank you.
And I'm sure our staff is available anytime for trustees. So we can always ask questions as we read that very riveting.
See you by the pool.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Soilu?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, it is unanimous. We move on to 20G, which is the to approve the renewal of the service agreement with Solace, Inc. for the 2024-2025 school year. Taurus?
Yes, in front of you this evening, you have the renewal agreement brought forward. Solace is one of our many partner agencies that helps provide our families who are interested in receiving services. And so this has been an ongoing partnership that we've had. So in front of you tonight, you have the renewal agreement.
Okay. Trustee Anderson?
Yes. One of the reasons I asked to move this was related to the renewal process that is on here. It currently is showing that it has an automatic renewal for 1-year terms for the next 5 years. I was wondering if we had had a conversation about that with them, or if that was their standard contract.
Well, they're offering the opportunity for us to continue to renew one-year contracts for 5 years, but we're not obligated to renew every year for 5 years. If that makes sense.
Yes. And I think one of the opportunities that I thought that Solace was presenting when we first learned about them during COVID was about the family initiated referral process where families could call if they were concerned about their child. Now I don't know if anyone can hear me. But I was a little surprised to see how low that number is, not just for this year, but it was particularly low this year when it seems to me that after, I think we've been doing this now for 4 years, we would anticipate that families would be more aware of it. So it's not necessarily an awareness piece, but several schools had only one anonymous search, let alone any family-initiated referral requests or asks for help. And so when we initially started it, it was offered to us for free, which was great. We could test it out and kind of see what the need was. And then it was $30,000, and now it's not to exceed $56,000. But it seems like it might be redundant to me based on the fact that we now have so many opportunities for free mental health services and referrals in our county, including Be Well, the National Alliance for Mental Illness of Orange County Warm Line. We have our promotoras that are engaged in the community. A majority of the people that had called in were Cal Optima members, and Cal Optima now is doing a robust job with communicating with their members. And so I think the data has been helpful to see what some of the needs are and who's asking for help, but it doesn't seem like it's necessarily meeting the same need that we were thinking it would, which was to assist families who need a referral quickly. It might be being used by staff, but not by families.
Yes, and you are correct that we had 182 searches district-wide that families initiated on their own. And over the course of the last 4 years, this district has done a tremendous job in continuing to invest in the support services that we offer families and students. And so we have seen kind of a roller coaster ride of participation with Solace over the last couple of years. And part of that is because we have other opportunities, as you described, for students and families to be able to receive services. Solace does have a creative carve out in the community in terms of how they, how they provide their service once they are connected. So once a family is connected to the agency, being able to have that concierge service, have a family matched up with the service, have the multilingual services at their fingertips. It has provided us a carve out service for some of our families. We do have other opportunities. We do have, as you've stated, the Be Well. We do have Hazel Health that came on board. This board approved that just this past year as a part of an OCDE grant that provides telehealth services to our students. So this is just one additional resource. Again, our district has done a tremendous job at being able to provide our families with multiple different types of resources that are, allow our families to be very comfortable in their choices and when they need support. So in front of you tonight is this agreement for $56,000. It has gone up in cost over the last couple of years, but it is just one additional service. If we did not have this service, we would continue to be able to provide our families with other connections in the community to be able to get them health support and mental health support.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, it looked like the people that we were referring to most were Western Youth Services, of whom we have our own partnership with.
Correct.
So I know we have a website that we're currently using, or we're using it that's like co-branded for us. Would it be possible to, I guess my motion would be if we could phase this contract out for one more year, not 5 years, but for 1 year, and then transfer all of that info. We've learned a lot of data. These have been great for data. We have like very specific demographic needs, very specific mental health needs, and by school site. And I think now we have elementary counselors, now we have a wide stable of support services. And so I would like to make a motion to approve this just for this 1 year and then perhaps fade out, or just a 1-year contract.
I would second that. And also, I just had a quick, sorry, I put my light on. I just quick note, I noticed, thank you, looking through the data, the highest usage appears to be at our secondary schools and those with lowest parental involvement. And it doesn't necessarily track to Title I versus not. It's interesting because I would say it's a lot of secondary usage. So if we are looking at how we could phase that out, I would just love to figure out a way at the schools with low parent involvement with our secondary schools that maybe this is something that we do. It's like at a PTA meeting or just on the school website for parents who have a student who's having a hard time. Because I couldn't tell you based on this information if it is our secondary students who are searching for themselves, but it might be just because they're it's such higher usage at those two types of schools. So is that something that we could do, like a way to make that just more aware that we have those opportunities, but to parents at the secondary level through that?
Yes, we can. So if you approve the contract tonight, we can create a digital and a digital blast that could go out to families just to remind them that this resource is available.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
And if all of a sudden there's a spike next year and we have a lot more participation, then great. But I think a 1-year renewal is more appropriate than 5.
And that would give us an opportunity with Sarah Collier, Administrative Director of Student Services, to be able to evaluate, as we should every year, the data, and if we did see a change or a trend, bring that back to you and or prepare for transition.
Thank you.
All right, so we had a motion from Trustee Anderson and a second from Trustee Barto. And let's go ahead and have a vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. We'll go to 20H, which is the approval of renewal of the agreement between the Newport-Mesa Unified School District and the City of Newport Beach to participate in the School Resource Officer Program for the 2024-2025 school year. Ms. Doris?
Yes, in front of you this evening, you have our SRO agreement with the City of Newport Beach and the Newport Beach Police Department. This is a renewal. We've had our SRO program in both the City of Costa Mesa and City of Newport Beach for several years. And so tonight in front of you, you have the renewal.
Okay, so do
So
we
I'll
have
make-
any comments?
So I'll make a motion to adopt, but I do want to have a discussion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so we have Trustee Barto that made the motion and then seconded by Trustee Ursulou, and we will begin with Trustee Barto, whose light is on.
Oh, thank you. I can turn that off. So thank you very much. I think I was appreciative of all of our SROs have done for our Newport Beach schools, and we have a lot of really positive feedback. I think one of the conversations that we've kind of had is just a way to, in our contracts, kind of outline the things that we do and maybe why it's so successful. I know a lot of times we're at CSBA conferences and different school districts are talking about the varying degrees of success that they have with their SROs. So I'd love to kind of flesh out what our process is, why we have such good results, why they're so well received. I think that would really help other school districts.
So to clarify, you just gather data.
Data or process or kind of what our
Best practice.
Best practices. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Trustee Anderson and then Trustee Ursulou.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this time to discuss this. I initially brought it up because there were just a few edits that are needed on the contract, including the contact person. And then there's a question that I had about responsibility between the city and the district, and I didn't feel like that section was clear, and I understand that staff is looking into that. And then I think it's evident from what we were just talking about that everyone up here, including our professional data scientists, but all of us like data. And I think one of the things that would be really important to learn is a bit more about the impact, and also if there's any opportunities, particularly with our two cities, to be working together, and to make sure that all of the roles and responsibilities are clearly communicated. So we have some of our students live in one city, but they attend school in a different city. I don't know always that those conversations are had. It sounds like they haven't been had in the past. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to perhaps ask that, and then also just ask some specific questions. Currently, it looks like we only have contacts, and one of our schools that again has over 2,000 students only has 3. So if we have 3 police officers in one city, but there are not a lot of contacts, do we need 3? Do we need 1? Do we need 6? Just data is helpful in making those decisions. And I think it would be really great to just to even have just like a 2-pager as to like, here are some successes this year, here are some challenges, here's some goals that we're working on with the district. For both cities, we don't have the city of Costa Mesa, so I can't comment on that one. But so this is not only Newport Beach, but I just think they could have such impact on our students, and I want to make sure that we are caring for our students well and offering clarity and support to the community. So, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Arroyo?
Yeah, I think a lot of what has just been said, that it's fine to approve this now, but within the next year, we should have some kind of standardization across all of the SROs around the processes, what trainings across the 2 cities, sort of what are all of those roles and responsibilities looking like. And then right now, yeah, counting contacts, that's a very like output counting, and we should really look at like what is the outcome and what is the perception of, you know, school site leadership and teachers on the role of SROs, what's the student perspective, what are the SROs thinking themselves about their duties and their where they see that they're most useful. So there's definitely an opportunity to get some data on the program if we're going to continue to do it.
Okay. All right.
I can gladly take that feedback and work with Dr. Smith and our 2 cities to have discussions surrounding, you know, the vision for the SRO program, and you know, lean into their partnership to see their willingness to participate in some of the suggestions that you've made this evening. In terms of our internal controls, we can always do better. We can always ask more. We can always provide you an opportunity to hear from us about the SRO program. And that's an important piece for you to understand about output and, you know, the outcome from when we have individual officers on our campuses. And so I can work with Sarah Coley to create that for you, to be able to provide a presentation later in the year about the program and the wins and the challenges. And then in front of you this evening, you do have data, and that data is incidents where, you know, officers have leaned into those incidents on those campuses. And so data collection in terms of our side of data collection versus the police can vary a little bit, but that's something that we can strive for.
I think too, if we can have data that is just
Trustee
aggregated
Anderson?
by city, sorry, because like, so this list has both cities, so it's hard to know what happened. I mean, did someone just call? It's really hard. So yes.
Well, those are the contacts by school site. So yes.
Yeah.
So if you look at Newport schools versus Costa Mesa schools would be the way to divide that for this evening. But yes, we could do that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But please know that we do value our SROs. I do know personally from being a parent of 3 students who graduate from Newport-Mesa, just having an SRO on campus has very much, I think, elevated the experience of a relational context with students, with the police department. I think the role of the SRO is more of a helper on campus than someone who's, you know, there to catch wrongdoing. And I do like that relationship, and it's very valuable. And I also know that from the SRO perspective, they're welcome into the community. They speak at our PTA meetings. They attend events, parent education series events on campus. So they're very engaged. So there's a lot of value to that. It's just, it sounds that what I'm hearing from trustees tonight is that we need to perhaps tighten up the best practices, get some data and standardization. All right, thank you. So let's vote.
Trustee Crane?
Is there more?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to clarify. There's also parts in the contract that are very unclear about that. So it's not, the way that the contract for both cities reads isn't that is necessarily their role. There's also pieces about like pre-investigation. There's concerns that I've heard from parents about student records and data. So it's not just, I think people have a lot of different perceptions, which is why I think it's really important that the contract is more clear. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. I did want to compliment the board and trustees for feeling comfortable to pull something out of consent and have a nice civil discussion that will help us move forward and always do better. So thank you, trustees and staff, for listening. We move on to resolution adoption calendar 21A, adopt resolution number 26624, all funds June budget 2024-2025. Mr. Trader.
So this resolution is for approval of the 24-25 budget, which includes a reserve level of 18.6%. That is a robust and rarefied level for unified districts. And then in addition, from a multi-year perspective, it also reduces our other post-employment benefit liability by $15 million. So from that perspective, the budget is prudent, and it also gets a lot of stuff done. It moves us forward on your safety initiatives, including cameras and so forth. It also accelerates maintenance and facilities projects of our $581 million of deferred maintenance. And then includes things for CTE, Title I, specialists, instructional block, and special ed supports.
All right, thank you, Annie. Let's go ahead. Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Trustee Weigand and seconded by, did anyone second?
Oh, I can second it.
I thought, because you were shaking your head.
Oh, we were just,
Trustee Barto.
complimenting Jeff.
We were just saying how much we like you.
All right. So let's show them our love by, voting on this. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, you have unanimous love from us. Okay, 21B, adopt resolution. It's getting late.
I know, we're getting
okay, we've been here since 3:30. 21B, adopt resolution 270624, education protection account expenditure determination. Mr. Trader.
By law, we must identify expenditures going to the education protection account, and that is $3,707,080. And this simply tells us where that money is going. It's all, none of it goes to administration. It's all to instruction.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Trustee Weigand and seconded by Trustee Anderson. Roll call vote.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Weigand?
Yes.
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes.
Trustee Barto?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
All right, unanimous. The motion passes. And we move on to informal reports with Dr. Smith.
Yeah, I had planned 30 minutes worth of reports tonight. And then it was brought to my attention that it might be one of our trustees' 19th anniversary. It might also be true that her husband's in the audience waiting to take her on a date. And my wife would clobber me if I went 30 minutes. So let me just focus on a couple of things. I want to thank everybody involved in our graduation since our last board meeting. 1,585 students. Again, 95% of our kids walk that stage. These were amazing ceremonies. We were inspired, we were motivated, we learned. I really thought our trustees did a great job in their addresses as well. They even personalized them when we had people retiring. It was a special week, promotions and graduations. That doesn't happen accidentally. So to all of our classified certificated staff, to our administrators, again to the board, job well done, everyone. But we don't take summers off. A lot of our classified folks we've heard don't get to, but others don't either because we're in summer school right now. 2,000 kids started last week in elementary summer school. Wow. As I shared with the board, they didn't wait to start learning. They started learning immediately, core academics, enrichment, engaging activities, athletics, the arts, and we fed them. 2,000 kids learning, being enriched, being fed, safe in our schools. And then we have about 1,800 secondary students doing credit recovery so that we can get to that A to G requirement that we talked about quite a while tonight. So really, really powerful 3 weeks, and I'm just so grateful for all of you and the hard work that you do. I was asked to comment briefly about the state's budget. While it hasn't been signed, it looks like a deal is there. Just briefly, I know that trustees Bartow and Murphy will go at length into this in July when they give their update. But I think what's important here is they got away from gimmicks at the state level that would have hurt our Prop 98 base and would have hurt that base in ongoing years. A $5 billion with a B dollar increase in this deal. Deferrals went down from $2.4 billion to $330 million. That's significant because they're not taking money away from us. And being a community funded district, cash is slow certain times of the year. So those deferrals really hurt us. And then they remade their obligation, recommitted to paying back 98 obligations, Prop 98 obligations. So ELOP, special education, we're not Prop 98 driven, but it helps some of our neediest students and neediest programs. So we're happy with the deal. We hope the state's economy turns around so that it'll get better in out years. But as Jeff said, our budget is excellent for 3 years and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Smith. We will go on to trustee reports. Trustee Wygant.
Yeah, I'll just be brief and say how great graduations were to watch and to be to participate in, and it's just the best part of the year. Obviously, it's kind of the chicken soup for the soul, just to see what everyone has achieved. So thank everyone for getting our students here, but also summer school looks like it's going extremely well. I see kids playing and having fun at our local schools, and that's just so awesome, and giving our parents some breathing room with their kids and giving them something to do while they're working or just trying to figure out life. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your date.
And I just want to say thanks so much to all of our staff. They're working so hard at our summer school, and so many of our administrators are still at the office. So thank you to all your support. Thanks for all your help with the kids. And the graduations were all beautiful and heartwarming and made all of us cry a little bit. So thanks for that too.
Oh my God, total tears. Congratulations. And I only have one thing to say, and that's to thank Mike at Operation Clean Slate. If you get a chance, stop by College Park Elementary. He redid, and volunteers from Eaton Corporation had their employee volunteer day out at College Park. 2 beautiful new murals at the school. They look fantastic, and so thanks everybody who helped with that. Stop by College Park. It looks so cute. Thanks, Mike.
What are the murals?
One is like kind of block pictures of like symbols of the school, kind of like in their colors, and then the other one is like a rainbow of words like hope, trust, whatever, like it's just a little rainbow. It's very cute. It's online. I think we put it online, right, Annette? I think so.
All right, Trustee Pearson.
Congratulations to our graduates. It was amazing being able to be at all the graduations and see the end results, and have a great summer and off to your new adventures.
Yes, and I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Kirk Bauermeister for his many, 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 many years of service in our district. It was a joy to be able to thank him and to speak at his last graduation. And I just wanted to also thank Jeff for some of the last minute changes that you did to the budget. Thank you. I'm looking forward to having our budget. I'm thankful that we are very, very trustful, that you are so transparent and let us call you and talk to you and ask you all of the questions in the world. And so I just think that we're in really good hands. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask about the family advocacy item that came up in the earlier report. If you could let us know more about that, I would love to just hear what some of the specific needs might be. That's all. Thank you.
Well, trustees, thank you all for your questions and always caring, and staff always answering the questions and being willing to share with us your wisdom. Yeah, class of 2024 graduations were amazing. It's our mission accomplished, as I said last time. What's interesting is that when the switch turns, because all of a sudden, I know at East Bluff Elementary, there's a construction fence. The roofers are there. There's about 20 trucks on the blacktop. Things are getting done in the summertime. So it's kind of fun to see that, we don't really shut down in Newport-Mesa. We keep going, and we want to keep improving our, whether it's our curriculum or our facilities. And I know that CDM's getting their aquatic scoreboard, and the baseball's getting their scoreboard. They're very happy. So I think when people see that there's movement happening in our schools, our constituents are happy, and because they know that we care and we're moving forward with good things. So thank you. And a quick shout out to two retiring teachers. It was Julie McCormick, who also used to be a principal. She just retired from CDM and had a career in Newport Mesa for decades. And also Kathy Krolop at East Bluff Elementary. It was really cute. The community had a party for her, and they invited us to attend. And so we had, again, the OGs there, like the old generation, and then we had the young families. It was really a lot of fun. So on that note, good night. Thank you for being with us tonight. 9:07, we are done.